Because there'll have to be a transcript provided. Mr. Hildebrand, it's been so long.
Yes, good to see you, Stuart.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Michael and Mike.
Before we get too much into the details here, let me just verify that there is a, that this is set up to record to the cloud so that we're going to get the transcript, if you just bear with me. It
Thank
should
you.
be, but I need to check.
Mike, I just wanted to either have you clarify at the beginning of the meeting or I can do it, that there was some language that was on the agenda that got posted that suggests that there will be public hearings at this work session, which was a mistake. That shouldn't have been on the agenda. So I think we should just clarify at the beginning of the meeting that this is just a work session and there won't be any public hearings. And so people shouldn't expect to be participating in this. It's really just a board work session.
Right, which is traditionally how we've always done our work sessions. I mean, they're sort of, our chance to interact with the applicant's team, sort of, roll up the sleeves and kind of work through some substantive issues and try to get the application further down the road kind of thing. Yeah, we don't,
Yeah.
in the past when we were having in-person meetings, we might entertain a question or two if it wasn't, the room wasn't packed and we just sort of wanted to give, some of the community an opportunity. But being that, Zoom and this, video conference stuff, I would just say just us and the applicant. So that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was language on the agenda that made it seem like it was the same language that was on the regular meeting agenda, which shouldn't have been there. And it makes it seem like there are going to be public hearings held, which is just not right. So I just want to let anybody who's watching know what exactly
that's fine.
So,
you can sort of read that statement off and whatnot.
Okay.
How are we doing for a head count here? I see Stuart. Hello, Stuart.
Hello there, sir.
And let's toggle over here a little bit.
You've got 4 members so far, Michael. You got a quorum, actually.
All right, good. Give it another minute or two, I guess. I saw David had to run to the city or something, so he can't.
Right.
It's fine.
hi, Alberto and Seth.
Hello.
I know I've never said this before, but I got to say, Brian Stewart, I love your haircut.
I work at it.
It's unfazed by quarantine.
Yeah. You got a good barber.
And Mike.
And Mike, yeah, Mike.
Yeah, we all seem to have the same disposition. I don't know what that's all about. Is this water here in Ossining that somebody didn't tell us about?
It's too much brain. It pushed all the hair out,
Yeah.
Okay, I'll use that next time. I like that one.
I know I've got to sign that or sign off on the minutes from February, and I know that amendment that we did to the 3 meetings, and then you're basically taken from the agenda. So I'll get that over to. I'll probably drive by and see Joe one of these days over at the building department. So
Cool.
out in the parking lot. I think that's where all the business happens now.
Right.
Somebody calling in? Oh, no.
Okay. We do have an attendee. We got JB here. We have, he's actually submitted a bunch of PowerPoints and things like that to help talk about some of his projects. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pull up everything I have so that we can share my screen and then go from there.
Okay, so with that said, I'll open the meeting, but I'll let Amanda make that statement about the whether there'll be public comment or not. And then Jaime's going to basically run the control panel, I guess, like we did last time. So you'll unmute and mute when you have to. But I guess other than JB, there's really no one else coming to talk, or?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So if you'd like me to, I can just say that little clarification piece, Mike.
please.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify that this is a planning board work session and not a regular meeting. So there was some language that was mistakenly included on the posted agenda suggesting that there would be public hearings conducted during this work session. But for anyone who's observing or for anyone attending, that is not the case. There will be no public hearings conducted at this meeting.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and we are currently, you may notice, we are lacking our planning board secretary. She's having challenges. There's been some outages in her neighborhood in terms of the internet. So she's been dealing with that all day. I think she said Optimum's coming in. So at some point she may be able to call in, but
It looks like he's here.
Miss Jaime or Amanda, if you guys want to just do sort of a roll call for whoever's on the board so we can acknowledge that we've got a quorum.
Jamie Kane is there. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I can do that.
Hello,
Sorry.
Jamie.
Okay. I can do a roll call.
I'm here.
So, Mike Beldotti,
Present.
Jeffrey Gasbaro, looks like he's not here.
Jeff just texted me. He's having some issues getting on, but he'll try to get on.
Okay. So he might be late. Alberto Fernandez.
Here.
Okay. Seth Roy.
I'm present.
Robert Bowker. Looks like he's
Nope.
not present. Michael Aronson.
Present.
David Chow. Not present. Eric Talbot, alternate. And Eric Barasa, alternate.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have some village staff. We have Jaime Martinez, planning director, present. Jamie Kane, board secretary, is present, and Stuart Kahan, village attorney. And me, Amanda Brosey, the village land use attorney, is present.
Right, most importantly, the one that's going to keep us out of trouble. Okay, that said, why don't we get right into, I know 19 Campwoods and 25 Cedar Lane, which is now 196 North Highland, I think. We'll start to get into those, I guess. JB?
All right, I'm going to allow JB to talk. And he should be here now, and everybody can see the screen share. JB, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me? Or,
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but
You gotta turn on your video, I think.
I thought whatever I'm doing, can you?
Maybe if I move you over as a panelist, it will allow that to happen. Nope. Yeah, it says your video is off. Your name is showing me usually because your video is off. I'm gonna ask you to start your video. We'll see. If
There you go.
There it is. Okay.
There you
All
go.
right.
Maybe I should turn the video. Okay, so we start with 19 Campus. 19 Campus, we're trying to get an extension, and I was reading the memo that Consortium had put together, and yeah, we agreed that we're gonna have to go back for at least 2 variances. The rest of most of the items we can deal with, and we were addressing them, but while the property is surrounded by the commercial use, is not surrounded. It is residential zoning. So even though we use the same footprint, we're gonna have to get a variance for the upstairs. And the upstairs, and I know that even though we are reducing the amount of impervious area, is still over the limit. So that's probably gonna be the second variance that we're gonna have to request. Now, my question would be that, can we still get an extension pending those 2 variances so that we can move forward with the rest?
I know this is not my call here, but the discussion we had last meeting, Mike, was really that they didn't need to get an extension at this point. They've requested the extension in time, and we can wait until they go speak to the zoning board or they resubmit their application where they don't require variances. They have not resubmitted anything at this point. They haven't submitted anything to the zoning board, and they have not modified their application to avoid those variances. So there's no real, unless something's changed, and maybe Amanda and Stuart, you can weigh in, but unless something's changed, there's no real need for you to grant an extension at this point when they haven't, nothing's changed.
But my question is this, that if I requested the extension back in February, now if we go for the variance, we rectify those issues, then it'd be a matter of coming back and the board granting the extension?
Well, I think the issue is that if you need variances, then you're going to need to submit an amended site plan application. So that might be is that what you're getting at, Jaime?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, it's basically, I think you're asking the board to grant an extension on site plan approval conditional upon a variance, but you haven't even asked for a variance at this point, right? So.
No.
Can I just jump in? Don't we sometimes grant site plan approval conditioned upon the applicant getting a variance? And, it's not that it could be inefficient if the variance is denied, but I know that we've done that in the past.
But my question would be, would there be something substantial that needs to change in the site plan because of the variance? I would agree if there's nothing that substantial would need to be changed, but how would we know that?
No, we are trying not to change the site plan. We're trying not to change the shape of the building or the units. That's what we're trying to maintain the approval as the planning board approved it. And that's why we're going back to seek those variances. We did look into trying to reduce the footprint and then it will become a totally different building. So, after the meeting on the 28th, we did look into trying to make those changes, but we feel that given that there is no residence adjacent to the building and that even it is a residential district, but there is the school surrounding the property surrounded by the school next to us, and the impervious area, which would be the other variance that we will have to address, that we cannot, the other part of the site plan that we cannot modify, that is we are decreasing the amount of impervious area, not increasing it. So both variances I will feel comfortable that we can get. And if not, then we are back in front of the planning board to make changes to the site plan.
I have one other question. What if we just continue to adjourn this request? That way, it's in essence sort of tolls where you're at, and you can always come back for an extension, and then this board doesn't have to act, and you can go in front of the zoning board.
Yeah, I think that's essentially what I was advocating for. And again, your question earlier was around do you approve applications conditional upon zoning variances being granted? I imagine this board has done that many times in the past, as most boards do. This one does not even have an application for zoning variance right now.
Right.
The client was told, the applicant was told that he needed to apply for a variance. He didn't. I don't think he needed to produce a lot of new information to apply for that variance, but has not.
Right.
So
with that said, in the past, we've done coordinated review where it's as a planning board, we're reviewing these concerns and conditions. If there's a variance or an interpretation or something that we need from the zoning board, we could, request that the zoning board review it. We're favorable with the proposed interpretation or variance or whatever to give them some level of comfort to act on it. I mean, we've done that in the past, just one observation. And I guess the The other bigger observation is last month when sort of we kind of found out, hey, we approved this thing with conditions, but there was such a big disconnect between what we thought we approved and some of these findings that Brian and Keller, and Joe had come up with. We just want to tighten that up, I think, in the future so that we don't have sort of like this misunderstanding, if you will, that like we sort of approved this, but a lot of things seem to go sort of off the rails. So, and that other application, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to recognize that you run the risk of granting an approval for an extension, and then they don't ever apply for the variances. And then in a year or 6 months or however long you give them, he comes back and says, did you apply for the variances? Oh, no, I didn't do that. And it's possible it could happen. There's reason to believe that it might happen. So it seems that if in a good faith effort to say that they are seeking this variance, they should at a minimum submit for the variance.
And can I just clarify one thing? JB, you said there were no adjacent residential uses, but in fact, above the tasty table and the dry cleaners, it's second and third floor residential.
And the school kind of wraps around, the property for the school wraps around.
The school is on one side, and on the other side where the easement for the parking, that is actually residential above commercial.
I don't know if there is a lot of that goes behind our property that belongs to the school as well as the school access, a parking lot. So we have a parking lot in the back, the tasty table on one side and the school on the other.
Right, I'm just saying it's residential use above tasty table and the dry cleaner.
But that's part of the same zoning as we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have just one other question. If we were to give you the extension, you said then you could move forward. Like, what exactly could you move forward without the variance? What exactly?
I have Jeff, I have no issue waiting for the variance. I just don't want it to. I want to make sure that once we get the variance, that extension comes into place that we asked for in February. I don't want it to, let's say we got 1 or 2 months with the variances, and then we obtain the variance, and then we have no planning board approval. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
So maybe Amanda could just clarify, if we continue to adjourn, we'll still have the power to grant the extension when they're done at the zoning board.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't have that authority.
I think there's a couple of other items that also to make sure that everyone here is on good footing to move forward with this. There were other comments that needed to be addressed, and I believe that there have been no submissions made on this since that last conversation. So is it okay if we allow Brian to go through those comments and see how close we are to getting those comments addressed, so that you can, at that point, essentially grant it a variance once, or grant the site plan approval theoretically once the submission for the zoning variance has been made. Go ahead, Brian.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just looking at, just to go through the memo. I mean, we went through it last time, but just the bigger issues besides the variances were things like the dumpster. I know we talked about that. The dumpster within that easement and onto the neighbor's property, has any headway been made with the neighbor? Do we have any, or are you going to revise your plans to take the improvements off of his property?
Yes, that's. And we are reworking the square footages to meet. I mean, we already have done that, but we will submit the proper square footage and the parking compliance.
Yeah, the parking too. What's on the ground floor in the back? I don't think that was counted in the parking.
That is basement mechanical room. And it's not in good condition right now, so it's mostly an abandoned basement. It's not being.
Oh, okay. So I think on the rendering, it looked like more like it was almost like a little business or an office or something. It had like a little.
Oh, no, I think what you're looking at is the entrance to the stairs. And then there is a door to the mechanical room. But we have an entrance for the residential component. Because one of the items, and board members that were part of this, I should remember, one of the items was that we worked a lot on the elevations on the exterior of the building, and the fact that at one point we didn't have a connection from Campwoods, from the street into the apartments. So, and we had a sidewalk going down to the back. So there was a comment from the neighbors and the board members was that we needed to, go back to the drawing board and come up with a access or common area from Campwood, which is kind of reduce the amount of retail in the front, and we have done that. And then, so there is two ways to get into the residential, from Campwoods and from the parking lot in the back, from the stair and the elevator. And then I think there are two other doors, Brian, but those are towards the access to the area underneath. There is no store.
Okay.
And the one
All
thing
right.
is, like, I know, I will try to look for it, and I had asked the client, but I think at one point somebody, I wasn't sure, and I know Stuart was on the, I'm not sure if Stuart's on this call. I think there was a copy of the easement, and that was reviewed at one point because that had come up at one point, and I will research that again. But I know that the issues was dealt with. There was conversation about the easement and who had access to it and how it came into place.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking things, like mentioned in the code along that residential district, you'll have to provide screening from the parking lot. So that's something that
Yeah,
can
that
be
is right.
done. If not, that's, I believe it would be another variance. If you don't, making sure you still have adequate room for all your parking spaces and drive aisles and things.
And there's no, I think there was a memo I was looking today, and I can share with that. At one point, there were like 4 or 5 items. It's no removal, it's accumulation, traffic movement, and those, and I can share those copies with you, Brian. Those memos, those issues were addressed back in a memo back in December of 2018, something like that, because those were all dealt with.
So JB, when you say items were dealt with in the memo, and again, I remember Keller had done at least a couple memos on this project. Were those points or those issues worked into the plans? Because again, I think if it's on the plan, it's there for perpetuity. We know it's there. So,
There were
the language thing I think we have to work out here, because we're being told things are taken care of, but not only do we want it in a narrative form, but I think it should be memorialized on the site plan and the architectural plans too.
Well, what we had done is done not only in the narrative, we have cut and paste this, snippets of the plan of how that was done. I mean, I will provide it, but I mean, I don't know if this was like kind of the format that it was done. So it was a memo, and it was show the plans where we had the snow removal, the loading area, how the garbage was going to be removed, how the truck was going to maneuver. Those kind of were done, and either we can include it again on the drawings if it's not, or issue the memo. But I think yes, I think maybe that should be a drawing, so in the way it's included as part of the approval.
Yeah, of course. All that, and that, moving forward, each submission after, it all should be like a snowball as things are picked up at the end of by the time the chairman's ready to sign the site plan, it should be everything from start. So it's not, oh yeah, I submitted that figure back in November, it's good. But,
So one of the
things have changed on the plan.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked about internally with you, Mike Baldati, is about the changing the process so that upon approval of anything, once site plan approval is done, the drawings need to be updated with any of the conditions that are possible to put in there, and then there are special conditions within the approval language that says at the time of the building permit, at the time of the, C of O, if there are any special conditions that need to be approved at various different times. I'm not sure that the original resolution referred to all of that. So I guess my question is, Amanda, are we able to, is the planning board able to amend, well, not amend, but during this resolution, add that language to the extension to clarify what needs to be done? Is that even possible?
I don't know that we can do anything in an extension that would alter the original approval.
Well, Stuart's here on the call, so, Stuart was our counsel at the time, and, I know we had Tracy, our planning consultant, or our planner at the time. Maybe Stuart could speak to that a little bit.
It would probably have to be an amended resolution overall, not just an extension, because the extension is essentially extending the resolution that currently exists.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're putting something new into the resolution, at least from my perspective, it would have to be an amended resolution. And conceivably, that could start the clock again for the applicant. But I agree with Amanda. I don't think that what you could do is just put that into the extension resolution, because that's really sort of a very, particular thing. But the board could conceivably look at adopting a revised resolution if it thought it necessary to encompass those, those additional conditions and issues with regard to that.
Would it require new seeker and new submissions of supply plans?
I think I would need to look into that.
Yeah, because it depending what's being put in. I mean, if it's, let's say this, if it's a Scrivener's error, it's easy.
Right.
Because you just fix it. But if what you're getting into are, in essence, substantive issues which could impact the prior, prior, seeker declaration, things like that, which is something I guess, Amanda, you'll have to look at.
Yeah.
That becomes, so that's, I guess, Michael, what I'm saying is it's not as easy an answer. It really would depend upon what the nature of the change is. If the seeker declaration remains the same, we're probably in the same situation.
Right.
But if in fact it requires something else, maybe a different study or something else, or a revised EAF, something along those lines, that probably would open this up. And may potentially reopen it as a public hearing.
That's what I was thinking.
Because you're effectively then reopening the resolution. So it's
I think the key, I think the key for JB and the applicant is that he sells the fact that, what was presented a year ago and what was approved essentially is the same thing. The overall height, width, scale of the project hasn't changed. These are sort of technical or issues that sort of have to get dealt with to, make the bulk requirements work. So, just my personal take on that.
I wonder, JB, if it might be, on a certain level, be advantageous to go through a path that, even if it did require an additional public hearing and to reopen seeker, would it be advantageous to your client to have an amended, or an amended resolution that allows you to tack extensions onto the end of that, rather than essentially have an extension now, and I think then you're limited to one more extension. So would it be advantageous to you from a timing perspective to do it that way? Because if it's not even worth us looking into it.
Well,
and what is it seems like there are two things I guess we need to look at. Do we need to do that, or if it is advantageous for us? I mean, there's I believe it's two different things, right? One, it may be a requirement from what I hear. I mean, we're going to keep the bulk, the size, everything the same. So it's going to be a matter of getting variances and minor changes on the site plan. But now, if that triggers an amended site plan, if that also triggers a different, we have to do a different application. We have to, I don't want it to restart the process. And we went through this whole, it did took us a while to get to the building that we end up with. There was a lot of ARB consultation. There was a lot of neighbor input. There was a lot of discussions about traffic, about the building next door. So I just want to make sure that,
So let's do this. I think let's hear from some of the other board members. I know Jeff and Michael were part of this review process. Some of our newer guys weren't. Again, speaking for myself, I feel comfortable with what we did approve last year. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I wouldn't necessarily want to have to reset button on this. If there's some, intelligent way of getting you to the finish line so that you can get a building permit, I think that should be the goal here. That said, though, let's, Jeff, Michael, other board members.
I would just say we did a lot of work. I think it was mentioned the moving the sidewalk or removing that from the plan and creating the interior corridor. And so I thought we spent a lot of time and we got to a project that we liked much better than what we started with. And I really liked it by the time we were done. My thought would be to try and preserve as much of that work as possible. Let's adjourn this so we keep all of our options open. And then they should go to the ZBA as quickly as possible. And if the ZBA basically grants variances for what we approved, then we can kind of figure out whether we're going to call it an amended or revised or how we tinker with it at that point. But to try and speculate what's going to happen, because we could spend a lot of time on this and then maybe they don't get the variances. So
exactly.
That's just my thought.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, again, my only concern is if there's something that the variance is required in terms of substantial change to what we've already seen and approved, then I would be concerned. But otherwise, whatever mechanism allows us the greatest flexibility to move forward, I would be for.
Yeah. If I can mention, I would ask JB if we could have a staff meeting with you next week regarding this. Jamie Kane can reach out to you and we can have a meeting between Jamie, Amanda, Brian, and myself just to go over the details and the comments that are listed here. Because I would prefer that the next time that we talk about this with the planning board, that we're able to say that all those comments have been fulfilled, or at least there's some sort of resolution that we can provide. I don't think that it's a really good forum, even in a work session or anywhere else, to have to go through and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Why didn't you do this?
okay.
I think it's a waste of everybody's time to have to go through that when this information has been submitted to you before and we haven't received anything back. And that's part of why some of these applications are getting adjourned, because no progress has been made. I know that you got a lot of stuff going on and you're not doing it to like slow things down, but I think it would speed up the planning board meetings in general if we could focus on the projects. Since you have a lot of you have the bulk of the agenda, to focus on the projects that you think the planning board needs to be looking at and adjourn the matters that are not, ready for prime time yet.
Right, and that's why, we're having this work session, and those other items that we didn't submit the changes, because again, I have no problem having a staff meeting, and I don't think we need to go through them now, but I think the most important items here were the variance. Those were two items that we could not.
I honestly, I mean, respectfully, those were important, but they were not the only items. There were some other, rather large items that needed to be addressed, but as long as they are addressed, it's easier to come into this meeting and get that done rather than having to go back and forth.
Yeah, and I think whatever we're doing on this application is sort of will be echoed for these few others. I know, like 196 North Highland, 25 Cedar Lane. Obviously, like Jaime said, the bulk of what we're doing tonight is working with JP. He's pretty much representing all these clients, these applicants.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, if I might, and Amanda knows this as well, the code provision for amendment of a site plan, first of all, only the site development plan elements that are proposed to be modified need to be presented. But further, any change, if it's more than 10% of the overall site plan, that's when you have to get into a new site plan submission. And then it would come before you folks as to whether or not you actually need to hold another public hearing. So basically, part of it is based upon how much of a change in the site plan there actually is. And I guess that's something that would remain to be seen. But that's, JB, just so you know, that's 270-52K. So you may just want to take a look at that.
And I would mention, you know, Michael and Jeff, you have mentioned that you look favorably upon this. So even if it did get reopened, because there's so much work that's been done before, it's not like a future submission, even if it did get reopened, has to look any different than the submission that was approved.
Yeah, this was kind of similar to what we did on Croton Avenue with the Baker property, where it went through a few different incarnations or whatever you want to call it. You know, it started out as one thing, it kind of morphed into something else, but literally there were 2 or 3 approvals or reviews or of essentially the same thing, but it was just kind of massaged to accommodate or you know, work within the zone that was finally approved over there. So I mean, the same kind of thing.
Just as an aside, you know that property was sold.
Yeah.
Yep. And we had to stop the people from doing work because they apparently did not read the governor's executive order.
Okay. Well, we could have a discussion about that offline later if you like.
It's okay. You know, I just get
No,
calls.
that's okay.
It's always fun.
So what are we doing here?
Stuart, and they all have one thing in common. They all say the architect said it was okay to work, like the governor.
You happen to be right.
I wonder who the architect is, huh? All right, so do you want to adjourn this for this meeting?
Well, this is just a work session, so.
No, I mean adjourn it for the upcoming meeting.
Plan to adjourn it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
plan to adjourn it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so with the applicant's consent, we'll adjourn this. This won't be on the agenda for 2 weeks from now.
Do I need to,
With the
do you want me to provide you something in writing for that? Like request to adjourn or?
Yeah, shoot an email. That'd be great.
Okay. With the hope that you guys will get this all worked out so that we can really move on this in June.
I think we will. I mean, I think that, you know, at least, you know, from a staff perspective, you know, we're all committed to helping JB get his stuff where it needs to be.
Okay.
So as long as, you know, as long as we feel comfortable, you know, we won't be sitting here kind of pumping the brakes on things.
Okay. 25 Cedar Lane, 196 North Han, I guess, 21-18.
Right, that one I did.
Can we, at this time, rather than have JB walk through this, can we actually let Brian start the discussion on it to go through the review questions that are open?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want me to scroll up and down, Brian, just let me know.
Oh, yeah, I have it open on mine. So, so this was that, just so everyone can separate the projects. This was the commercial use down below with the residential above. This was part of a subdivision that was under the Morgado 25 Cedar Lane a few years ago. And during that subdivision, it came up that the sewer for 25 Cedar Lane runs through this commercial piece and connects into North Highland. So all that is shown on the subdivision plat and noted that when they come to develop this commercial piece, we'll take care of your sewer and not interrupt any services to the residential at 25 Cedar. So that's something. It might be tricky, you know. It's a lot of, they're cutting this property pretty extensively. So that sewer pipe that's now 4 feet in the ground might be 12 feet overhead by the time they're done excavating. So, you know, that's the kind of detail we want to see for that, to get that pipe around what JB's proposed, the building, with adequate cover, and then connect it to into the existing main in North Highland, which, if they dig up the road, will involve DOT. So you know, not, it's just a line on a plan, but to get it to something that works is, it'll take some work on the applicant's end.
And obviously a great expense too, so.
Yeah, right. You know, and it could get into, you know, it could be where the building, I know there's an easement shown on the plat, but I think there's some flexibility for them to move the line to
Right.
where they need to. But
I mean, if you get a couple things like a sewer line and some other substantive issues like excavation or compact fill or whatever, I mean, you know, those types of things could basically make the project unfeasible from an economic standpoint. So,
yeah,
you know, applicant's decision to make, but, you know, it's good to know this stuff well ahead of time.
right. So yeah, just again, to say some of the comments in the memo again aren't show stopping, like correcting the areas. Again, parking. We had some comments about how the parking load was calculated, and it's based on, you know, X amount of square feet is required one parking space. So I think the demand for parking will go up, and whether they could fit what they need on the property is yet to be seen. If not, that's a variance would be needed. Again, parking in the front yard. I know we talked about this last time. I guess it's an interpretation of what's considered a front yard. It's my understanding that the front yard is parallel to the street. So whether the building is sideways or not does not matter. The front is along North Highland. So that'd be up to the board's discretion whether this, the parking lot layout would trigger a variance. So again, we just get into that the site, there's pretty extensive cut to make the parking lot with retaining walls. Just we'd want to see more of a design on the retaining walls just to make sure that they are feasible. I mean, the footings, like for example, the walls are shown on the property line, but they might have a 5-foot wide footing by the time they're done. So, you know, how is that, does that work? Will that encroach into the neighbor's property? Will you lose area? So it's, should be thought about now. So we're not back, a couple months down the line when they can't build what was intended. DOT's not fun to deal with. They have to get a commercial curb cut permit. They have their own specs and regulations for grade and drainage. That should be started now. Because just from personal experience, they take a long time and they have their own way of doing things. So all those details should be on the plan now, and the planning board should be made aware of what DOT thinks, whether they, have major comments or if they're, or, if things can be approved in a parallel path. Again, some ADA comments, nothing too major. Stormwater, you guys, to finish a Secor review, they need a stormwater design. There's digging, excavating that far in this area. I bet it's pretty likely that they're going to be into rock. So to infiltrate like they show just doesn't work. You need 3 feet of separation of soil between your infiltration system and ground, either groundwater or rock, and that's state code. So the feasibility of that stormwater system needs to be verified by field testing, which we have every applicant do just to make sure it's feasible. Because if not, they have to redesign that system that's shown. So that's, as far as a Secor standpoint, well, big picture, that could certainly change how this plan looks. Again, certain, yeah, I mean, minor things like planted islands underneath. There's the parking lot. Some of the parking is underneath the building. The building overhangs parking. So just how there is some vegetation shown, if that was feasible. Water and sewer. I know we talked about sewer for the neighbor, but they'll need their own water and sewer design connections to the main. Again, DOT is involved with that. Down a little further down. Yeah, we get into, I know the code requires a buffer. I might have passed that, but when a commercial property is along a residential property, a 10-foot landscape buffer, they're encroaching with that retaining wall in the parking lot. I know in the code it says that it could be a fence or a wall, and it's my opinion, it's up to the board, whether that meant that a wall was a 15-foot cut wall, so it's down below, to maintain that 10-foot screening. I've rated it as it's either a fence or a freestanding kind of privacy wall to actually screen the properties.
There's some other properties along North Highland with similar walls in the back. Can we see how we've treated those walls in terms of that buffer if they were built in the time that the zoning was the same?
If we have that information, sure. I don't. If they were 10 feet back, then it wouldn't be an issue. Or
if they had 10 feet, then it's not going to be helpful. But I know that I think it's to the property. If you're facing it to the property to the south of this, has a very similar retaining wall in the back.
Okay.
There were two properties. The Inducee property down by the corner of North Highland and Cedar Lane. I don't know if it's in the same zone. Then where that limousine garage / mechanical garages. I think those are the only two things that were built on that side in the last 10 or 15 years. But
so
that's something that you could.
If it predates the zoning, then if the zoning was different, then that's not going to be helpful. But I would like that we would act consistently if we allowed that wall to provide the buffer in the past.
Anything else, Brian?
No, those are the big ones. I mean, I know
Okay.
we went through it last meeting, and we can certainly, when we meet with JB, go through the more technical things.
Yeah, I think, like Jaime said before, a staff meeting with you guys and the applicants team helps us go, moves us down the road. Anybody else on the board care to speak to this?
Jaime, this is the Cedar Lane side. You're going to have to go over to the North Highland side.
If you, the PowerPoint that I provided, Jaime, there is actually a picture of the property they're talking about, part of that. If I may, can I talk about some of the comments that Brian had? And again, I do think that if we can have a staff meeting next week, I mean, we can go over these items and how we are been dealing with and what have we done so far for it. As per the sewer connection, it was my understanding that the original subdivision, the location of the easement was flexible. So our idea was to move it to the one side. Also, there's been a discussion with the client about the owner, because he owns both properties now, to actually have a connection to Cedar Lane, which will require for him a pump. But if he goes through the expense, then of course we will have to abandon the easement. We will have to amend that in the site plan. But that was one of the other solution that we have looked at. If you go down, Jaime, I think it's the last frame. It has the, yeah, you can see at the bottom, you have the, this is the neighborhood. Those are all substantial walls too. And it kind of follows the same idea that we've been doing, which is the wall, the railing, and landscaping on top. That was for that. And the first wall, the tall wall, is actually originally proposed outside the 10-foot buffer. There was the second wall, or the smaller wall, that we have proposed that was inside the buffer. But we also have looked into, see, we eliminate that second wall and have a, the buffer zone choose with no walls, which can be, we have about 15, 20 feet between the end of the parking area and that. And the same with the, we have a structural engineer looking at the walls and the alternates of the wall. We know that we have a substantial keel size for the retaining wall, and we need to keep that inside the property line. We've been talking to DOT. Again, this is another project that we did discuss when we were forming the planning board, the amount of fill, the cutting. There was discussion. I guess this property, the board members remember, has been around a while, even before we got involved, because it was around for a couple of years for a subdivision. And so we had, first was around for the subdivision, then we came along with this project. Also, the parking requirements, we did go through it. We are eliminating or make sure that it's only the retail space in the front, the adequate amount of square footage. So the parking, we feel comfortable that the number of parking spaces will remain at 18. Again, sewer we dealt with, DOT, the front yard. When we checked the line, the front yard setback line, all we need to do was like move one parking space about, I believe it was about 12 inches, which we did. In that now we won't need a front yard variance for parking. If you,
I mean, JB, you're going through it and saying you did this, but are these plans coming? Like, or?
Yes, no, that's, and I would like to have, if we can discuss this at the staff meeting, then,
Right. So the big question here is, do we adjourn this like we did the prior application to June, so that gives everybody time on the same page?
This one, I feel like if we can determine at the staff meeting that, these items, all these items, I feel, I would like to see if we can get the extension done on this one. And even if
I have to sort of remind you, JB, and this is really important. There are submission deadlines that are there not just for the board members and not just for the staff, but for the public. You have items that were asked for, but nobody gets to look at them. So even if they're ready by next week's meeting, you pass the submission deadline. The public hasn't gotten any opportunity to look at any of this stuff. And it's things that you're supposed to submit prior to even getting the approval. So it's not my decision. Obviously, it's the board's decision. But I do think you should take into consideration that this is a public board and it's a public process. And the submission deadlines exist are so that the public can be properly informed of what's going on.
Right, and I do understand that. We went through the process, we submitted for this, we went through, a long time in front of the board. And then back in February, we submitted for an extension. Now, yes, 14 days ago, 16 days ago, we did receive the memo with all those comments, and we've been trying to address those. And I understand that. And like in Campwoods, where there are items that we know that are not, all I'm asking is, can we see in the staff meeting, these are surmountable items that need to be reviewed or will affect the site plan beyond a point that where it will affect the lots or what it was approved. Because I don't feel like, like the stuff that it needs to be changed will affect the site plan. If that's the case, then we have to adjourn it, but.
I think, Mike, I guess the question for you and for the board is a question of whether or not, if they submit materials this late in the proceedings and they show up with brand new materials at a meeting, do you think it makes sense to grant an extension based off of information that was just provided for the first time, even though there's not going to be a public hearing? Does it make sense to do that, or does it make sense to require this applicant and every other applicant that comes forward adhere to the submission deadlines?
Well, look, we always want these things done. I mean, the difficult situation here is, again, speaking for myself, we reviewed this project a year ago. We approved it. I'm mostly still okay with the application and the approval. We spent a lot of time getting the building to look a certain way, and JB came back with changes and different alterations. I think this is kind of like the other situation where you're given some time, because nobody said like this. All these things represent 6% change or 22% change to the original thing. So that's kind of like sort of the unknown here. But again, I'm kind of comfortable with how the building looks. I think, again, speaking for myself, Jeff, Michael, whoever else was back and, there with us at the time we approved it, you guys could, give us a sense of how you feel. But, at some point we got to move this thing forward. And look, I mean, I'm pretty certain JB's realizing now that, you got to get the stuff, in on a deadline. And, if you want us to accommodate you, we're willing to do that. But, it's a mutual situation. You have to have the engineer ready with some drawings and that sort of thing. I mean, you can't just, okay, we're waiting for, 1, 2, 3, 5 things.
Yeah, if I could just also add, we won't ever, that I can remember, go ahead and grant site plan approval when our engineers or our staff are telling us there's stuff outstanding. And we went through this whole process and these were never brought to our attention as a board. And so my thought is we should work to get this right with this application, and certainly with every future application, always get it right from the beginning. But I don't really see this as a situation where I would want to just say, no extension, let's bag all the work we did and start from scratch.
I don't think that's what's the option here. I just think the what's being presented as an option is adjourn until June instead of deciding the extension in May, so that you can have the full set of completely updated plans in front of you, rather than approving conditional on receiving, the updated plans.
Yeah, I would want to adjourn. I would want everything to be right.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree.
And I definitely want to clarify, I'm not advocating for, previous approvals to be thrown out the window. And I also want to sort of recognize that as just a staff person and as, part of the staff that's going over this now, when we see, things that were overlooked in the past, we do have to address them moving forward. It's not really a statement of anything about what happened in the past. It's just more about, being thorough today and in our process moving forward. And,
I absolutely agree. These have to be addressed.
Yeah,
what's the best way to do it? And
it's important. I think, this is not about an issue with JB. This is an issue about, the community feeling, confident that we're doing our job. And
Right.
So if we don't even adhere to little guidelines, like getting your paperwork in time by the submission deadline, especially when this applicant, I think, can say confidently that he would have his extension if he had just submitted his paperwork.
Anybody else on the board care to comment to this?
I have a thought.
And, the thinking is let's adjourn this till June so that staff time to meet with the applicant and get this all worked out.
Did somebody have a comment?
Yeah, I have just one thought on this. I think that just to echo what Chairman Baldati and Jaime were saying, that it doesn't make sense to, to go back and, revise this site plan. Rescind the site plan approval. You guys have already done a lot of work on it, and now that new things are coming forward, you want to be able to address those with certain conditions. But I think really until a response to the memo that Brian highlighted from Keller Sessions has been circulated to this board, and everyone's had an opportunity to look at it and to sit with it for a moment, that you can't really move forward on this in a way that I think makes everybody comfortable. That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
JB, you're good with that then?
Yep. I would like to see if we can, when we set up the staff meeting next week, we can also discuss this project as well.
Great.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So next on the agenda is 65 Main Street.
Yes.
Yes, JB, you did submit a PowerPoint. You said you wanted to go over that PowerPoint. I'm going to just pull up the memo real fast, the review memo that we have for Keller Sessions on this. And do you want to, is it okay if Brian starts the discussion on this one as well?
Yeah, a lot of, if I can, because from the November memo, a lot of the stuff has changed in the project, and it's either way. I don't.
Well, so when are those plans coming
Those
forward?
plans were submitted back in. Those are the plans that were submitted back in March. We did change the stuff. There is no engineering and stormwater that has not been submitted, but what we would like to do with this project is to have the ARB, the architectural, that part of the planning board, so we can move forward with that, because those materials we have submitted, and there is a lot of work into that, and the finishes, and a lot of the layouts that we have changed, and that's the stuff that we wanted to be able to address and discuss with the board, because we don't want to, it's like, if all the engineering is done and we get a memo from Brian saying all the engineering has been satisfied, or he has met with our engineer and we have we have an agreement, this is a point where the board can move ahead. I don't want to then just then start with the architecture. The board is fine with the architectural and all the other components. That is great, but I want to make sure that we don't, that this is all together now in sequence, that we don't deal with one item and then we move on to the next one.
I get that. I guess as an architect, you want to make sure the architecture is correct, but from an engineering standpoint, like, how do you expect the board to move forward with a seeker determination? When you're not going to address the SWIP or the drainage.
I'm not asking the board to.
How do you think it's going to be faster to break it apart and not do it all together now? What is the finishes have to do with making sure your drainage works, that your driveway's graded out correctly, that meets the code?
Yeah, JB, if you could maybe kind of explain this a little bit. You did tell me a little bit about this. I know I heard from Pete Chernoff. You mentioned something about, I hope I'm talking about the right project here, but he mentioned something about like risers or something in the building and the architectural that is distinct from some other components of this. So if you're feeling like you want to kind of compartmentalize the ARB, the BAR approval aspect of this, can you explain what you're trying to get approved?
Right. There is, there is the engineering component of stormwater and all these, the other items that I think Mr. Charles was talking about was, the structural. We do have a structural engineer and can that be a conditional at the end of the, of the project? Or,
I think that the determination internally from everybody on staff was that we don't think so. We don't think
I
it
just
should
wanna
be.
be
but-
clear what we're talking about here, because correct me if I'm wrong, JB, but you submitted a letter related to 1416 Brandreth
right.
that asked if certain engineering components could be made conditional to your approval. And we're talking about 65 Main Street right now.
Right.
Okay. Are you asking for a similar type of conditional approval to also apply to
When
65
it
Main
comes to
Street?
the structural for the retaining walls and all that all had to be sounded by, not by us, by a structural engineer and the building department. Yes, that those are be conditional too. Anything that had to do with stormwater and architectural, those are things, so those are pertinent to the board.
So did the board all receive a copy of JB's memorandum relating to the topic that we're discussing right now?
No, because they didn't send a memorandum regarding the topic that we're discussing right now.
Well, we're not, I'm talking about just generally the idea of that
So,
engineering piece being
You're talking about for the
conditional.
other site.
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's the same idea.
I did send that out to Mike and Jamie. Jamie, were you able to send that out to the full board? I thought you did.
I thought it went to everybody.
I did. I sent it out to everyone.
So I guess it's the same kind of idea that JB, you're advocating here, that stormwater engineering and structural engineering would also be made conditional of the planning board approval?
Not the stormwater. I mean, we do understand that, if Kellan Sessions and our engineer, Paul Bertet, come to an agreement that there is enough to sustain that a stormwater can be created, that a structural can be done for this retaining wall, that not a fully developed plan needs to be submitted for that, or that, a construction document. And it all comes with the, financial uncertainties. Everybody wants to move the project forward, but we are we jumping into the other project as well, but there is a lot of testing that is going to have to be done on this site for the structural walls. So the structural engineer says I can't just, design a wall based on what I see. We're going to have to do testing. This equipment is going to have to come in. And now, of course, nobody can do that right now. And that's, we don't know how long, and everybody is busy. So what we want to be able to do is be able to bring the project to a completion.
So I just out of, just remind me again, if anybody else aware of where we are in terms of the, lifting of the pause? Is the Mid-Hudson region in phase 1 starting next week?
Not yet.
Not yet?
No, I think the best case is like June 6th is really what they're looking at right now.
All right, so phase 1 is construction, which would include somebody coming on the site and doing boring tests or engineering work. And I believe that there is is there any affordable housing in this project?
No.
All right, so then it doesn't address that, but. So June 6th, we're saying the best case scenario? And
that's what I've heard, yeah.
I mean, I don't want to go through the whole memo, but our memo, our intent was that, these are items that I think every applicant understands that if there is no structural, if there is no bedrock, or we have to go deeper on the bedrock, but there's always a structural way to do it. And in that, if that changes the project, which seldom it does, then yes, we understand you have to go back to a planning board. But those items are structural, are part of construction document. They have to meet that's done by structural engineers, have to meet New York State Building Code and the building department. And we sure know we all have experience. We heard about retaining walls here. So, you know, those are items that do not affect the look of the building, the number of units, or that's how we feel. So that's what we're saying, that, again, in order to move the projects forward, to almost do like, not like a design build, but, you know, this is the project, this was approved, and now the clients or the applicants, they feel much more comfortable knowing that they have an approval moving forward and investing all this money on this expensive testing and structural work that needs to be done, not the other way around. I think that was the intent of our memo, and that's what we are hoping to move these projects forward, especially now if there is a movement in construction, there is opportunity, and we have these projects that that want to move forward, that take the opportunity to make sure that we do that with them.
Yeah. So, you know, Mike, I think that one of the benefits you have of having a broad, you know, base of staff members here is that you get to ask us whether or not we've ever seen anything like this before. And so I can tell you that, you know, I haven't seen everything in the world, but I've never seen this happen before, where that engineering work was not looked at, because it really can have a significant impact on a project. And it seems to me, though I'm not 100% on this, that I don't know that you can adequately do the environmental assessment without having that information. So my opinion, just mine, not Brian's, not Amanda's, not anybody else's, my opinion is that it seems like you would have insufficient information to make a decision. But I think that if you'd be willing to allow Amanda and Brian to weigh in on this, their experience may be different than mine.
Right, and also would want to hear from the entire board too, to get their sense of, you know, what their feeling is about this. I mean, just me personally speaking, there is a big risk for JB to do this, in the sense that, you know, we could say yes, but then there could be serious engineering issues, you know, a few months down the road, and, you know, you got no approval and you're back to square one. So it's an interesting, you know, scenario, but I think it's one of these things where, you know, it's a big risk for the applicant to spend time to get an architectural approval, but then, you know, staff, Brian, whoever later on, you know, we find out the engineering doesn't work. So there's a concern. I'm not saying there isn't a solution, and maybe we need some time to think about that, and staff can get with the applicant, you know, drill deeper into it, if you will. But, you know, let's talk about it.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, no one that I know of has asked for structural testing, or, you know, things that have to do with the structure of the building. But when we ask for retaining walls, things outside, that would affect the site plan. So it's not anything to do with the building foundation. Like JB said, that's all building code, building department. We're not there yet. We want to make sure that the site plan is together, and the environmental impacts are looked at. And a question for JB is if you guys have been in front of the EAC yet, because that's, it's in.
Yes.
You have?
Yep.
Can you submit, I don't have it, anything you have from them, if they have
I think Jamie can, yes, I can send you.
Okay.
I got a copy from the board. Yes, they have a, for both projects, this one and 14 and 16 Brandon. And I think that, you know, it's kind of weird jumping between the two projects, but they're kind of the same, almost the same application. I think, Brian, it was more with Brenda, because we're talking about doing boring tests on the rock to support the foundation. And we did have a boring company and a boring engineer there. They feel comfortable with the rock, but, you know, it's like, it is a very complicated site to do a boring test, which will have to be done. And that is where, that's where our memo was about, that, you know, like, if we had to go 6 feet, we had to go 10 feet with the rock. It does not really going to change the way the structure works. It's just going to change the way it's constructed, on the rock. And those were expenses. Those I don't have to tell you. And I mean, you guys were involved as well in building the greenway, so that how involved that will be to get that testing done, and that's what that was the memo was about, to kind of avoid some of those testing. Or we should want to get to a point with the board where we say, okay, this site plan, this concept, this idea, we okay with it. So I don't know if I want to say a straw call or whatever. So when we go back to our applicant and say you have to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in engineering to secure this permit, that that we're not just doing this and keep doing this and then coming back and there is no project. And that's what I'm saying, that we have submitted this information about the architectural, and I think everything, architectural, site plan, the layout of things, everything is.
I mean, JB, don't you have variances already on both of these projects?
Yes.
So why don't we just move forward with, you've cleared the biggest hurdles. The BAR is usually the easiest hurdle, because all at that point we're doing is like comparing maybe a couple different finishes. Like what, I'm struggling to understand what. Okay,
so I just wanted to, the board has seen the projects, both projects. So the board is comfortable with both projects architectural wise. I mean, I haven't got any feedback on that. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's.
So here's a thought. I mean, we're sort of kind of going down this road. We don't want to make some mistakes that, not to say that those were mistakes from a year ago, but some oversight. And again, this is a work session. We're kind of hashing things out. If a preliminary approval for some sort of a site plan was done, but upon, further, more detailed engineering of the site plan, like, Brian said, the SWIP, boring testing, bulk requirements, all those sort of things. If those don't bear out the preliminary approval, then your approval essentially would be void. So, it's a big for JB's applicant to take, but that could be sort of one possibility. And again, this is just for discussion.
And if it's something like that is, if we have a preliminary approval, I don't know if that work is even.
I don't know. If you're looking for
JB,
if you're looking for something official, like an approval, but I think you did pitch these as, I remember we did informals on these at one point, and I think the reception that I remember was, pretty positive. And so,
okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for the rest of the board. I had a generally positive reaction to some of the elements here. And I think like there are things that will work out as we go along, but maybe the other board members want to chime in, but it's, I just, to give some sort of approval again, without, checking everything off of our list.
No, we're not, again, it was more like.
And as Jaime said, I don't recall ever doing something like this before, since I've been on the planning board.
And this is, again, it's more like, maybe preliminary is not the right word, but unofficial is something. My experience has been that, with applicants, when we have these big hurdles to, they do take big investment. It's in financial uncertainty, and it'd be much better if there is a preliminary or a straw call, or at least saying, or at least we know, Jeff, that that there is a, like I said.
I mean, you already have variances. You can. That's a major hurdle you've cleared.
Right, and so architecture. I mean, the way the building looks, the shape of the building, all of that, the board seems to be at least preliminary okay with.
I mean, I never remember a project being killed because of BAR. It was something we worked out because the standard that we review is so, it's similarity, dissimilarity to neighboring properties.
Listen, going back to Campwoods, we did spend like 3 or 4 months going back to, and even with the Crown Avenue property, with windows, shape of the, the building, finishes, and that that was all I was asking for. You know, if we can, you know, and even for the public to comment on it, if we have, you know, if we do a presentation, and that was our intent to, you know, so we make those changes. So when we have the engineering, it's all once, it's not sequence. And given the opportunity to the client to feel like there is a, you know, a support for the project. So those investments, you know, the investment in all these structural and engineering, it is doable.
So JB, just speaking for myself again, look, I'd probably feel more comfortable if at that staff meeting, whenever it happens down the road, your engineer is with you and there's engagement on your applicant, on the owner's side, that, you know, he has retained an engineer, and that, you know, Brian or Joe or whoever at Keller and sort of certainly our staff and council feel comfortable with that. So that's kind of like, again, just me speaking for myself. Because again, we could talk and go round and round and not really, you know, at the end of the day have, well, we were going to get this, we're going to get that, we didn't get it. So, you know, there's got to be a commitment on the applicant side to really have an engineer at a staff meeting or engaged at this point.
I want to pipe in. First of all, I want to point out that in terms of you guys considering the BAR approval, the code actually says you can do that concurrently with the site plan, you know, approval. So if you want to start looking at that now, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. I know that, like, logically it doesn't seem to make sense, because why approve the finishes and trim for a building that you know, that like doesn't exist on a site plan yet? But the code says you can be doing that at the same time. Or even it says, or prior to the planning board's review of the site plan approval. So you don't have to approve the site plan before you start doing the BAR, FYI. But also, I really do want to emphasize that I do not think it's at all advisable to make any sort of the engineering reports that we're talking about conditional at all. I think that all of the stuff that we're talking about, you know, the engineering issues, even the structural retaining wall stuff, like Brian said, it relates to the site plan. All of that is within your board's purview to discuss and to consider with your consultants assisting you. And so it's also not as if, you know, JB has submitted some engineering plans and there are a few open comments that can be responded to as conditions. That's definitely not the case here. So I don't think it's advisable here to leave things wholly up to, you know, some sort of a conditional approval.
Yeah, and we I think one other piece to consider is the financial cost to the village of reviewing these. We don't have the engineering staff that's going to be capable of doing this, so we need to get outside consultants. We have escrow now that pays for, you know, Keller Sessions to take a look at this. So if you close out the decision on this, the question sort of is raised now. Well, is Keller Session going to be funded by the village, or is it going to be funded by the applicant in the future under that old escrow, right? So, you know, the reason Keller is here is because we don't have the ability to look at it inside. We need their help.
And just to be clear, and I think that, you know, thinking that this what I'm understanding was what I was looking for. If we can do the ARB at the same time, that's all we're requesting. And when it came to, if there is a staff meeting between Keller Sessions and our engineer, and there is an understanding that, you know, materials are submitted and there is, you know, a threshold reached, and that's what we're looking for. And when it comes to a structural, I will communicate, you know, with the client that, you know, the boring test needs to be done before this board can move on. And I mean, we did ask, we did requested, and the board has, you know, you guys feel like that needs to be done before you can move on. So that's what we were, in discussions and trying to get this done and the expense of it. So we were trying to not have that done, just to do it in a different phase. But again, if we have a staff meeting, if we can go forward with the ARB. So again, if there is 2 months of changes in the ARB, and there is 2 months of changes of work between current session and the engineering part, then that can be done together. And then we have in 2 months, we have a approval. And not like in the past, we have received approval for site plan, then we have to go back for ARB. That's what we were trying to avoid. That was.
I mean, I completely agree with that, because we should be we can look at the architecture each time. And then when we get to the end, we're not going to have to send you back to look at the windows a little differently or something. Let's just look at it all. And if your project, if we find that, site plan is appropriate and we vote for that, we could on the same day have done all the architectural work. That's just a matter of like organizing how we hold our meetings so that we make sure every time we look at this, we're not like skipping over the ARB stuff and saving it for later.
So with that said, why don't we get a sense from the board if we want to review the ARB with the proviso that a lot of engineering has to get done, and site plan is not necessarily any place where it needs to be right at the moment, but we're going to look at, we're going to do this review in conjunction with that being done. How's the board feel about that?
You're asking whether we would prefer to review concurrently or just sign off on the ARB ahead of time? I'm not exactly clear what you're asking.
I think that we want to look at the architectural now to move this along, like Jeff said, but the applicant knows that there's still a heavy lift on engineering, and there's no guarantee that any kind of a site plan will be approved. So
right, yeah, I would agree. I mean, I just feel like I don't want to conflate this project with bandwidth, because I do feel like the issues, I mean, I understand it's the same ask, but it does feel like two very different projects to me. And this is, it's hard for me to imagine that there aren't going to be things that are going to come up in the engineering report with 65 Main Street and with, Kellard's review, that things that really do need to be considered that may or may not impact architectural. I don't know. But, I mean, as what we've seen so far, I think, has been a good process, and we've had some input, and I think we're almost there on the architectural. It's just, I wouldn't feel comfortable completely signing off, not knowing, the site plan and the engineering results.
Right. Yeah, because again, the applicant's going to run the risk that all this architectural time spent, formulating these plans might totally get, tossed in the waste can because, the engineering doesn't work. But that's the applicant's, decision or risk to take. Anybody else on the board?
Yeah, I mean, I would just agree with the fact that reviewing the architectural aspect of this job, and in fact, 65 Main Street, I think more so than the other one. And when thinking about the engineering changes in the back of the building, which are probably less important to the architectural review aspects of this, the ARB aspects, I have no problem with it. I do think that the engineering is going to impact the design, especially in the parking lot in the back of the building. And we have no business really making any decisions on that at all. It's not just a matter of getting the borings that we need. It's a matter of having a design that actually works that we can then review.
Thanks, Seth. Anybody else?
I like the projects. And I think we should just follow procedure. But I think the projects, personally, I like them, and they have my backing.
Okay.
All right, so that I'm clear and Jamie's clear and we put this on the agenda correctly, you are going to put this on the agenda for discussion on the BAR, correct?
I think so. I mean,
It's technically being adjourned for planning board purposes, but it is not being adjourned for BAR. So it is on the agenda for the BAR. So we just want to make sure that we get the wording right.
Yep. And again, if JB has anything to show us tonight that's different than the set of plans I have on my floor here that from a few months ago, If
Yeah,
you
the
want,
same.
that's fine.
Yeah, we haven't, this is our March submittal. We have not changed the architectural, but we haven't had any comments. So if there is no comments, great. But
Okay, so then the other part of that is, you know, a staff meeting that's going to happen down the road next week, you know, whenever. I think it's imperative that the applicant's there, you know, JB and the engineer, so that we have, you know, some real substantive discussions about moving this thing along from a site plan standpoint too. Because, you know, nobody wants to spin their wheels and,
right.
you know, design an architectural building looks beautiful, but like as Seth and Jeff have said, I mean, you know, you're not going to build it because you have to build a, you know, 20-foot high retaining wall in the back to get the, you know, the line to, you know, less than 10% or whatever to get the cars in and out. So
Right.
technical things.
Yes, and some of the stuff we did move the handicap parking away, so that we did some work. So good.
Okay. Jaime, did that answer your question, or are you confident or comfortable with?
Yeah, that answers my question. I would, you know, I'd want to mention it's 7:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. There's a lengthy agenda here. So we may want to figure out, do you want to have further discussion about 1416 Brandreth? Is there more to add? Or do you want to make a decision about adding that to the BAR as well and keeping it off the planning board in light of how that other item is being, 65 Main is being treated?
I kind of like that idea, because then we don't have to spend another half an hour on that now, if that's the case. Other than
I only have one question. And
hold on one second, JB. Other than 1416 Brandreth, you also got 10 Marble Place and the Secor Road project. Is there anything else that I'm missing, or?
No, but Secor Road, I think, is going to take a little bit more discussion.
Right. Okay. So in the effort to kind of to expedite the meeting, is JB, are you okay with the same concept on a 1416 Brandreth, that we can adjourn it?
Yes, the one item that is with the parking waiver, and I don't know how that affects us being in front of the Board of Trustees, or so, but that's, I guess we can discuss that at a staff meeting.
Have you clarified what your specific request is of the board? I know that with their being asked to review the parking waiver, is there anything that you're looking for by way of a, you know, a recommendation that we can submit to the board and for them to consider that?
I'm not sure what is required from the Board of Trustees from us on that. I know that I thought it was like Secor Road, that there was a referral because of the parking waiver, but I'm not sure about that. So again, we can discuss that at staff meeting, because I know we are in front of the, there's a licensing agreement or lease agreement that is being worked on. And I'm not sure if the parking waiver comes into place, so we just need to clarify the number of units that we requested. But we can discuss that. I don't think we need to.
I mean, I think what might be helpful, Michael, and to the board, I think I would recommend that you request JB give you some language of the recommendation that they're seeking. And then you can evaluate whether you agree with that language or not, or whether you want to modify it to be different. But if the request is kind of open-ended, it could require a lot more discussion on stuff that may not be pertinent to the recommendation. If they have a recommendation that they're looking for, they should ask for that recommendation, and then you can evaluate it. It would expedite this conversation, I think, significantly.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have to talk about it now, but we will have to find out what is the Board of Trustees is required from us. So yes. I'm not sure what the situation is with the parking waiver from the license agreement, so.
Wouldn't the parking waiver be from the planning board and the license agreement be from the Board of Trustees?
Right. So my question was, do we need the one to continue with the other, or they're independent? That's my only question.
I don't know, honestly. Do you need anything? Do you need a parking waiver, or do you need a recommendation letter regarding the the license agreement or what?
All right, so
I don't know. I apologize. I mean, I feel kind of like
I don't,
I'm
right.
supposed to know, but I don't know. So
Well, the last time we met with the Board of Trustees about this, I thought that they had indicated you could kind of move forward with both processes at the same time.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that. If you're, seems
And
like you're
again,
just going to take my word for it.
No, no, and again, for clarification, I mean, again, this is also site plan and architectural. So are we saying we're going to look at architectural again this, in 2 weeks and review that further with the applicant, knowing that he doesn't have any kind of a final site plan, in sight right now until a lot of the stuff gets done, engineering, working out parking agreements, so forth and so on.
Yeah, I think let's just focus on that.
yeah, can you even grant a parking waiver without site plan approval anyways?
I don't think the code is very specific, but I don't know why you would.
So,
As long as we can bring all the processes together, that's fine. Okay.
The thing is, if you don't have a parking waiver, I don't know how you could draft a very good license agreement.
Right.
So.
Okay.
So what are we doing then for 2 weeks from now?
Do I have to submit something in writing for the parking waiver, Hannah?
no, I don't think. I think we're fine. I think that what's clear is that you need a bunch of different approvals. They're all connected to each other. At this point, you need the site plan approval, which will get you the waiver, which will get you the license agreement.
Okay.
I think what you need to do is you need to focus on getting those comments responded to so that you can get the planning board approval. And if you want to look at the architectural stuff, then it can go on the BAR. If the board wants to put it on the BAR, it can go on the BAR. It would be adjourned for the planning board. But you may also want to clarify with your client. I think he believes that he can get a BAR approval and start working on his project.
No, not on the project. Yes.
For this one, I mean, I remember him speaking very clearly about the rafters or something above his building, that he could get started working on that. If he's incorrect on that, then you need to inform him that he's incorrect on that.
There are two different, in this we're going to discuss, there's an open permit that will be affected by how we do this. And that's why there's a permit to the existing dwelling that will be affected by how we approach the building. That's what he's talking about.
Okay, so then is he expecting an approval from the BAR prior to the approval from the site plan that would allow him to move forward? Does it affect his workflow? And if so, you should communicate that to the board so that it can be determined whether or not the board can move forward with granting something or not.
Okay.
But to get another angry, email, I think everybody would like to avoid that. If he can be accommodated, that'd be great. But it's incumbent on you to explain why you think it can be accommodated to this board so that they can move forward with your request or not.
Okay.
Can I ask another question about this project? I don't know where this is going to come in the process, but what is your client done, if anything, in terms of addressing the community opposition and concerns about the project? Has he had any ongoing conversations with the church group and the other folks?
He did try several times to have a conversation with the neighbors, and I can let him speak to, how successful he has been or not to that.
Because I don't think that's going to go away. I haven't seen any that's
I agree.
going to mitigate their concerns at this point. So I would just want to see some effort on that part.
Right. And this is, again, this is a project where he's, there's a lot of stuff that he's been doing to mitigate some of those issues. So.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else on the board care to speak to this?
I just wanted to ask real quick, just it sounds like he doesn't are there two separate applications that he's looking for answers on? So it almost sounds like the ARB question on the existing structure, you said it was related to another job. Is there a totally different application that we could be issuing an ARB opinion on, totally separate from the site development?
There is current work being done on the 5 dwellings that they're there. 2 of them are finished. There's more work on the other 3 dwellings. And how we approach the exterior, how we do the architecture will depend on the comments from the ARB.
But as part of this second job, it sounds like that's you have 2 totally different jobs. I'm just wondering why they're so tied together, but that may be a building department issue.
It's a building issue in that.
Yeah. I was just going to say, because I know that the restaurant piece of this is not really affecting how you would view the property from the street, because that's all basically in the basement level.
Right.
But you're doing work in the existing 5 dwellings that are there, and that's not going to change much. If you need an ARB approval with respect to that work, can you just submit an ARB, or, why can't we review that separately as like a part, maybe sort of what Seth was saying, review that instead of trying to do the ARB for the whole project before we've gone through the rest of the site plan aspects of it?
Well, I still think that the whole project, all goes together. So yes, we can separate the 2 ARB applications.
May I ask a question real quick, JB?
Yes.
This is Eric Talbot.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, do you have an open permit right now on 1416 Brandreth Street? Is that correct?
Yes.
And is the the work that's being done there on those 5 units correct? Is it consistent with what you've basically submitted in your site plan application?
Yes, it has not changed the
Okay.
the number of units. No, we haven't changed the number of units or the number of bedrooms. So the parking is still the same. Is that what you're?
Yeah, that's it. Because really, the new construction, the new construction would really just be the restaurant and the art wall connection.
Right. Yes.
And the rehab is happening on the existing building.
Yes. And there is no change of number of units. There's nothing of that sort.
All right. Yeah. So I see how you could split these up, and it would be if you have concerns with the engineering aspect of the Greenway connection being able to move forward on the rehabilitation of 14-16. Thank you for answering that question. That's all I have.
So the question I think that was at hand is this picture that I have up right now. It's this dormers that they're adding to that top floor, and the ability to add those dormers. So on a discrete level, I believe what your client is trying to get is the ability to put up those dormers, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I guess the question is, this is an Amanda question. Can the BAR grant an approval on this component and then grant an approval later for the full ARB approval? Does it require them to submit a new application? Does it require a new public hearing or anything like that?
I want to look at the BAR chapter in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? Not phased approvals, but
segmented. It will be
segmented. Yeah, that's a good word for it. Because from what we just read in the code earlier, you can definitely do a BAR approval prior to a site plan approval, but I'm not 100% sure if you can separate out pieces of the BAR approval and decide them, separately from the greater application for the BAR approval. So I want to take a look at the code on that.
So technically we can get a BAR approval that would include this, but of course.
The problem right now is that you have a BAR application that includes all of these things to be considered. So you're not asking for an approval on your application. You're asking for an approval on a small piece of your application, which for the record makes it challenging to explain that. So if if the planning department had a application that was only asking about the discrete question of that, then it would be different. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have a discrete application. So I think Amanda has to at least examine whether this is even possible
Okay.
without a discrete application.
Yeah.
Got it.
My
Okay.
question is this: if we're looking at this dormer, right? If we approved it, is it your intention to build that now, even though we're still going to be reviewing the entire BAR for the entire structure, site, and site plan? Question to JB.
Yes, I mean, here's my prior experience is even when you do a subdivision, everybody wants to see the master plan. So the intention here was that I didn't want it to show one part of the ARB, then come with another piece of changes at the building. The intention was to show one comprehensive ARB application, and maybe I have since complicated because it becomes a segmented project. But we have right now is that's basically what it is that one, we wanted to see the project as one from the ARB point of view. That was the intention. It wasn't the intention to make things complicated or segment the approval. I wanted to do the reverse. I didn't want it to feel like I was bringing, this one project and then bringing something else after.
So, I mean, one question I have is that, I'm assuming this would impact the habitable space in the building. Is it the kind of change that would rise to the level of requiring, an additional board approval?
Site plan? We're not changing.
Not site, I don't know. I mean, it's just, it changes the habitable space, correct?
Yes.
That's the only reason you would do it.
The work that you're doing now, this is not on those plans.
No.
Right.
There is a attic and there's a space there which is trying to make it a more with all the projects that we've been doing, one thing we've been trying to do is have the dormer and the roof patio that's been a standard in all these projects. And we're trying to.
Let me ask this question. If you were to take the submission you have in front of us right now and take the pieces having to do with the dormer and everything that's happening above the second story there, just submit a separate application for a building permit to do just that work. The building department will refer it to us because it requires ARB, and then you could just remove that from the site plan process we have in front of us. That would get you to the same place.
Yeah. If that's all it's going to do is trigger the BAR approval, it's a brand new application. Is that okay, Amanda? I don't know. Is that?
I mean, I'm thinking of Secra, and the only reason I don't think that would be it.
You're not changing the number of units. You're basically just adding a dormer.
Yeah, I mean, the project as a whole is an unlisted action, but and so maybe, somebody who really had like a big, no, I don't know.
That gets back to where Michael.
Rather than putting you on the spot, does it make sense for us to at least internally figure this out and try to see if we can make this work for your client? And
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some different spokes to the wheel here. I mean, there's we as much as we want to work with everybody, we kind of need to get a sense of what the best path is, and that's JB working with staff again, trying to figure this out so that we're not doing it at a regular meeting. That's the benefit of these work sessions. We kind of can have more candid discussions. So
just as a side note to that with the work session meeting, I know that at some point we're probably going to go back to public meetings, and we don't know when that's actually going to happen. But from a legal perspective, is it favorable to the board to have these work sessions on Zoom even in the future after we return to regular public meetings? And is it legally possible to do that? Considering you don't have a public hearing, it may actually be something that you'll get better attendance at and board members might prefer rather than meeting in person for work sessions. Or would you rather be doing this in person? Is that something that we can at least think about moving forward internally?
Yeah, that's something to think about. I need to double check the open meetings law.
I think it makes a lot more sense to have some sort of a work session than the half hour before our regular meetings, as we were kind of doing the last several months. Because the reality is you can't really dig deep into these projects like we're doing right now. But we don't have to answer that today. But I understand where Jaime's coming from. So.
I mean, this is great attendance. I got to be honest with you. This is fantastic attendance for a work session. And I imagine a regular work session held on an off day might be a little harder to get this kind of attendance at.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a question of when we're all going to, like you said, go back to some sort of normalcy where we actually have, public meetings where we're actually all, meeting up, hashing through the stuff. All right, so where are we with this then? Are we going to just leave this on for ARB then, or?
What, JB, what do you want to do? You want to keep it on the ARB?
Yes. Please.
And the board is in agreement with that? Thumbs up?
I'll let others speak, and then I'll kind of chime in at the end.
I think it's fine to leave it on for ARB, but I think that the bigger question is just because you get ARB approval right now, the way that it's formatted, it doesn't necessarily mean you can do the work. So we can leave it on for ARB. At the same time, you can look into getting this, on a separate track.
Yes.
I agree with Seth.
I agree also.
Anyone else?
The only thing I would be thinking about is that I'm thinking about from the perspective of, protecting the board's decision, because there is a little bit of opposition here, is does it then leave us open to like, well, this was a secret action and now it's been segmented, because it should have all been considered together. It's been segmented, but I don't think that's a very strong argument in this case. I just want to think about it a little bit more.
I would like to.
I think that the opposition was also just to take, remember that was to the restaurant. And I think that whether you add a dormer to a 5-unit pre-existing property is really just an architectural issue. It's not really, doesn't go to the larger issues that the project, presents.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's true.
All right, so we'll leave it on then. That's fine. And then, again, staff and the applicant can get together and iron out some of these other issues.
Okay, all right. Are you ready to move on to Marble?
Yeah, we got Marble and we've got Secor. I mean, do we need to take a break, or, that's, if you had to handicap how much more time we have here on these two things?
I think Marble's pretty quick. I think Secor might be a little longer.
Okay.
So if people want to take a break now, you want to take a 5-minute break, and it's up to you.
I'm good if we just want to push it through. If somebody's got to stop, just, mute your audio and video and do what you got to do. And then just, that way we keep this thing moving along.
Yeah. I do have one question about, Zoom etiquette. Is it improper to eat dinner during a work session? I don't know.
Yes, during a public meeting.
Yeah, definitely not good for a public meeting. This is a public meeting, so I guess that's my answer.
I saw that email from Stuart, so I guess he laid out all the etiquette and stuff. I guess it's okay to have a snack, but just don't have it on.
Okay.
I remember we had some work sessions on the Hidden Cove project, and I think Kaios or somebody was on the board then brought all this fruit, and we were just sort of eating and working. So we've definitely, there's precedent for eating during a work session. So
I've had pizza during a work session before.
Maybe the
You know,
difference is that you're being recorded now and people don't want to watch you eat.
No, and so I get that. I get it. All right. So 10, do y'all want to take a 5-minute break, or what do you want to do? It's really.
I'm good me personally, I'm good with let's keep moving. And if people
let's keep going, yeah.
Good with going. I just have to jump out for 1 second. Should I get rid of my video?
You don't have to unless you're carrying the video with you.
Why don't we just take a very short break and then we'll, a couple minutes?
I need like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
2-minute break?
Like 5.
That's
Okay.
enough. Okay.
Okay.
5. I'm wondering if going forward too, if we want to think about like time limits on these things. I mean, being on a Zoom meeting for 4 hours can get pretty tiring. So, not sure how to maybe time allocate these things, but maybe think about that a little bit, I guess.
I guess we've been in the Zoom meeting for 2 hours already. Wow.
I mean, what are other people on the board doing? You guys like on Zoom meetings, like 2 or 3 Zoom meetings a day, or?
I wonder if I was the only one to eat dinner. I think I ate dinner the fastest I've ever eaten in my life. About 2 minutes. Just
Wow.
like, all right, I think we have everybody. We're all back. Well, except Eric was there a minute ago and then he walked away. He's probably down the hall. There he is. So we're ready to go. Okay. I'm going to pull up. JB actually submitted a couple of days ago for the ZBA meeting a presentation for Marble Road. And he's asked that we use that today. And in this instance, I don't believe there were a lot of comments from Keller on this. So Brian, did you want to maybe speak real quickly about this?
Sure. Yeah, so we have a memo from January of this year. And it was pretty straightforward. I mean, the subdivision will create the need for variances, but it's kind of based on the size and geometry of the lots for all area variances. Bigger items are, yeah, they'll have to show they are in the floodplain, so they have to show if they're doing any grading, they're not filling within the floodplain, and just apply for a floodplain permit, which isn't that big of a lift. And a question I had in the memo, which I think has been addressed, is just what the existing buildings are now, what they're going to be used as, because that generates, you know, their parking demand. I just want to make sure that the spaces they have are adequate. And I think they've had some driveway and parking improvements just to show, you know, typical erosion controls and dimensions, and really more or less basic minor things. So, but I have not seen the what we're gonna see now. So.
All right, so JB, do you want to kind of go through this?
Yes, what was, I know this, now we're in front of the zoning board and we had to go back. The one thing that they come up was the existence of a easement. We still have not received a revised survey showing that, but we did, based on information we were provided, we did, you know, located approximately the location of the easement, which is the shaded area. I think it shows better on the other drawings, Jaime. And I know there was a discussion with the neighbor where actually this easement goes through their property, about their concern about stormwater. And I believe they actually called your office, Brian, and they spoke with, maybe we spoke with Joe.
Mm-hmm.
actually their property is higher. It was more lower than, higher than our property. And their concern was with the payment, since the two property have continuous payment, that their water was going to go into our property. So we did remove a strip of payment. So there is a strip of 4-foot green grass between the two properties. And I think now it's a matter of, I guess we need to get Secor from the board, then we have to go back to zoning, then we have to go back to planning.
Well, not necessarily. The planning board is the lead agency here, so the planning board has to make a secret determination. And ideally, if you're prepared to, once you make your secret determination, you can then decide the subdivision and site plan approvals conditioned on the zoning board granting those variances, because the zoning board has seen this application and is, from what I understand from being at those meetings, pretty comfortable with what they've seen. So in order to avoid this applicant ping-ponging, from planning to zoning back to planning, if you wanted to condition your approvals on the zoning board granting those variances, it would avoid a trip from the zoning board back to the planning board again, if that makes sense.
What action did we take so far? Did we lead agency determination on this? Was that the only thing we did so far? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, so you declared lead agency, and then the lead agency notice was circulated, and that's it so far.
Okay.
JB, can you refresh my memory really quickly what the goal is here? I mean,
Yeah, if we go back maybe Hamid to the landscaping or the prior, this, I guess this is the best. This application is by, of course, Dell Cemetery. There's a property that has two structures on it. And from what I recall, I understand, there is a two-family house original in the front, and in the back there used to be a like a shop for the stone maker for the cemetery, and that eventually through the years that became a residence, a legal residence. So what we had is when a client took over the property, what we have is one property in a T-zone with two dwellings. One dwelling has two family, the other dwelling is single family. So what we have attempted to do is separate the two entities into two separate lots. And of course, when we do that, that requires numerous variances. Some of them are pre-existing, so it doesn't matter if we do a subdivision or not. But the idea is to have two legal lots with one structure each. Against Marble Avenue, there used to be a curb cut that is about almost 39 or 40 feet wide. We are reducing that. We are reducing the curb cut. And we are also removing like a patio or covering that is in the village right away. Like I said before, there is an easement. It doesn't affect any of what we're proposing to do. We're not proposing any work to the houses. And we are actually reducing the amount of impervious area. We are removing pavement, and we are kind of taking what is there and reshaping into two lots with 4 parking spaces in one and 2 parking spaces in the other side.
Thank you.
Okay, I mean, fairly straightforward. I mean, is this something that we'd want to, the zoning board, just say that we're sort of comfortable with what's being presented here so that they can act on those variances with some form of certainty? I mean, I think Mandy said they already kind of are somewhat comfortable with what's being proposed.
Well, they did. I think they would have granted them the other night, but because you're the lead agency, you have to issue your seeker approval before they can take their final action.
Okay. All right.
So,
All right. I mean, I think at the minimum.
Well, so the question, I think you may have already answered this, Amanda, but can the planning board grant approval conditional on the variances?
I think so.
Yeah.
Especially in this, I mean, normally I would maybe be a little hesitant, but especially because in this case, the zoning board's already seen the application, has, you know, seen some of the development of this process, has gotten to a place where they feel comfortable with it, and is just waiting to see where the planning board comes out on their secret review. So I think it's okay in this case, especially to do a conditional approval.
So then we would make secret determination at our next regular meeting, which is at the end of the month. And simultaneous with that, it's still in front of the zoning board. They would act on those variances, and then it would come back to us, and then we would do some sort of a vote on site.
No, I think what I'm saying is that at the next meeting, if you wanted to, you could both pass the seeker determination and approve site plan approval conditional on the variance, so that this person would essentially only have to go back to the zoning board and they'd be done. And you know, I agree with Amanda. You want to avoid conditional approvals where it doesn't make sense, where there's a lot of questions in the air. But you also want to take into consideration the cost to the applicant of having, you know, individuals go back to meetings that are sort of not serving much of a purpose except to check boxes. So because it was clear in that meeting that the zoning board was pretty much ready to move, that doesn't, completely take away the possibility that they're not going to grant the zoning variance. But I think you could feel comfortable in saying that it is going to be granted, and therefore you could grant the site plan approval at the same time that you make the secret determination.
Yeah, that was what I was suggesting too. If you're comfortable with that.
That makes sense to me.
Yep. Everybody else on the board okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So then queue it up for 2 weeks from now. And anything else with that? I mean, the only other thing I'm thinking is these types of approvals, we'll put a note in there that no further subdivision would happen once we create those two separate lots. Assuming JB's okay with.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're good? Okay. Great. Next.
All right, next, Secor Road. All right, I got a bunch of stuff from Secor Road today. JB, I was able to send it on to the board chair and to Jamie. I'm not sure if it was actually sent out to the full board, so it will be coming to everybody. As soon as Jamie, I think, has her internet back up and running, so hopefully tomorrow. If not, I will send it out to the full board. Here it is. So just make sure did you label them 1 or 2?
I think one was photos, the other one is which has more general information, and the one that is more specific as to what you were requesting from me it will be the first one.
Okay. Do you know the difference in the number of slides in each one of these?
Yeah, one has 4 and the other one has 11.
Okay.
The bigger one has the larger size format is the one with the photos. So I'll go with the smaller, large format, which has the information.
Okay. I don't know that I'm following you right now. Is this the one you want?
No, the other one. That's just for the project, and in case I think the board has seen this before, but there was a repeat. Is the other one actually that has And actually the board has seen this too, but now I added that one, that slide that you choose.
Okay. All right. So
Slide number-
before you talk, JB, I just want to like make a couple of comments, and I'd like and Amanda as well. So to clarify what's being requested of the board here, I think they're asking for referral letter, essentially back on what has been presented to this board. There is a difference between what is being presented to the board today and what was presented to the board up to this point. There's a significant change in that, and so that should affect what kind of response you give to the Board of Trustees in terms of how you answer that. On a note that's tied to what they're trying to do here, which is a zoning text amendment, but not necessarily specific to just this application. When somebody comes in as, and I'm giving you my opinion as a planner, when somebody comes in and they have a project that purports to be transformational in a community, the idea usually is that they have a project that they think could be replicated in that area. So when you make a zoning text amendment, you say, you look at the application, you look at the project, you say, this is kind of interesting. This might be something that we want to apply to a larger area. And as a village with limited resources, you don't always have the ability to pay for the kind of environmental review and the zoning review that it would take to change an area that's not going to be gigantic, but may be applicable in a few places. So you work with developers who have good ideas and see if you can apply them elsewhere. I've done this personally on a project that I did in Peekskill regarding a senior zone, where we had to do a zoning text amendment that led to a special permit that allowed you to build senior housing. And what we did in that project was we said, look, we have a site where this works for us, but there are 4 other sites in the city where this would also work, where it would meet the same kind of conditions. And so what we did was, as a part of the environmental review process, in collaboration with the city, we said, look, we're going to look at the impact of this on all of these other sites so that you can make a decision about whether you're going to change the zoning text to affect all of these other sites. And so we as developers are now not just concerning ourselves with the development of our site, but actually providing a path forward for the development of the city as a whole. And so, that's really, I think, what these zoning text amendments should be about, right? Developers are going to come in and they're going to propose whatever makes sense for their site, and they're going to look to, keep their costs down low. That's really their responsibility to do that. It's the responsibility of staff to take that request and see if there's a way to expand it to apply in other areas rather than just focus on that. Like we have to look globally. They're looking specifically locally on their site, usually. And so that's where that back and forth comes. So when you're making your referral back to the Board of Trustees, I really do think that you should give consideration to whether or not what they're showing here is something that would work in other areas than just their specific site. And that could be a piece of your referral. You could say, look, I think this would also work on Main Street. I think this would work in another area. I think this should be looked at in a broader sense in other places, because it's something that should be considered elsewhere. And when it gets back to the Board of Trustees, then I have a chance to talk, and I'll give them my opinion there as well. But what ends up coming out of this process may be better for the village as a whole than just this one new building. Beyond that, there was some questions, I think, about segmentation that we had looked at one way last week, and Amanda was able to see this, and I think she has maybe some new comments that she may want to add to this about that.
Well, yeah, so when we, sorry, technical difficulties. I think the initial materials that we were provided with were not quite as detailed and didn't show this project that you're seeing now. And so basically the conversation that we had about segmentation originally, I think you might want to consider that topic a little differently now, because originally I think that the submittal really just said, all right, we just want a text change and a project at some point will come down the line. But here, I think this information shows you that a project is almost not fully formed, but definitely has been well thought out. And does that present a segmentation issue for SECRA? And by segmentation, I mean, should the text change and the proposed project, should the environmental impacts of those two things be considered at the same time? And SECRA really encourages that sort of an analysis to happen where it can be done. And it seems like that might be the case here. Maybe you'll discuss that a little bit more. I didn't necessarily think that was the case, given the information that we initially had, which didn't seem to show any project, renderings. But I'm suggesting that you talk a little bit more about that now.
Yeah, and you can see here, I mean, there's 70 proposed units. It's not a, theoretical, practice here. This is a project.
So the initial kind of request here was to think about residential on the first floor. We started to hash out some thought about commercial on the bookends of it. But you're saying now this is a newer submission or a newer, more defined plan. Is that sort of a fair characterization? What's going on?
This isn't new. It wasn't provided to the planning board.
I recall seeing this before at some point. This is not brand new. I don't know. It might have been before. This might have been presented to us maybe on an informal before, or in some way. The rendering you just showed of sort of looks like townhouses or whatever. I've seen before.
This project, this drawings that you see here, this presentation, this was presented to the Board of Trustees in June of last year. We will refer to you guys. We were presented informally to, yeah, you're right, Jeff. We did an informal presentation. So the project has not changed. I mean, the project has been in between 70 and 80 units. It's been discussed. We have another section that I didn't put here that shows the parking scheme that was discussed as well with the Board of Trustees, and it was shown to the board. In the other presentation, what I was trying to demonstrate is that how we have arrived to trying to change the text amendment for this area. When we dealt with, back then was Tracy and the Board of Trustees and the consultants at the time, we went through the process again that, we explore change of use, we explore change in the zoning map, all those items. And it was, the idea was that we didn't want it to change the whole zoning on this Station Plaza south of north, because the idea was to make sure that we maintain the commercial component along Main Street and at the bottom as you get to the train station. So that's how the idea came about making the text amendment an exception, and it was adjacent to the waterfront hillside. But then when we came to that component, that's when I think it was Jeff and somebody else on the board, we were talking about that necessarily that was too broad and it encompassed all those lots. So that's what I was trying to show in that. When in actuality, the lots that in the second slide that I show are the only lots that are part of the project. So you can see here, but in the other presentation, Jaime does a better, but I tried to, nope. We're back to,
I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry.
Yep.
I got a lot of presentations of yours up here, man.
But let me just chime in also on Jaime's point about whether we would look to see whether this is appropriate in other places. I would just say, as a general matter, and having read the 2009 comprehensive plan extensively, and just knowing this area that leads down to the train station, we want to see. I think as a community, it's our stated policy to have as much ground floor commercial as possible. So I think the idea of like sort of looking at other places where we want to have ground floor residential, at least in the planned waterfront zones, we don't want that. We want as much ground floor residential as possible. And I think the only reason why I have an open mind to this, and at least like within this block, is because this is such a unique block in terms of its steepness.
I mean, Main Street does have, there's a section of Main Street that is pretty steep as well. Not all of Main Street, but there is a small section of Main Street which this would apply to as well. But the text is written to only apply to Secor Road.
Okay, you're talking about the part of Maine where it branches. Yeah.
And so that's what I mean about giving consideration to whether or not this applies in any other areas. I do agree with you that you know, the community is very clear, the comprehensive plan is clear, everybody's clear that they want ground floor retail. So I'm not recommending that this be a broad base consideration, but to consider where the facts are the same, where the steep slopes are too much to accommodate commercial activity. If the request is being made to allow you to not do that, then, you know, it should be considered.
But that's why if you go to slide number 2, that's why it was requested to introduce language that said adjacent to the, you know, central waterfront hillside subdistrict, and that encompassated those lots. And then if you go to the next slide, that's where, you know, we still have a couple properties there that, you know, it was the board's intent that maybe we should keep those out of that. So when we say alongside the hillside district and Secor Road, I mean, it compensates all the lots, including the one in orange, but I actually want to clarify that the lots that are part of the project along Secor Road are only the one in red. So the idea was, how do we segment, or how do we make sure that those 2 lots on each end are not included? I thought that was my understanding of from the past conversations. That was the idea, was that.
I mean, I think what I had asked for and what I'd be interested in hearing about, and, you know, this is a board decision. Ultimately, it's a referral letter, and it can be as broad or as focused as you want it to be. So if the focus is that you want X, Y, and Z, you can say that. And if the answer is more general terms, give consideration to looking at these other areas, then that's what your referral is. And the Board of Trustees, they can take it or they can leave it at the end of the day. They don't have to do anything with the information, but the hope is that, you know, you're providing some details. So if the idea here is you do like the idea of considering a portion of Main Street where slopes are too high, then whether he puts forward the detailed information here, you may not need to respond directly with something that says, including this district, this spot, 100 feet from the street corner, this, that. You may not need to do that at all. You may want to say, look, we think that you should consider it on both sides. Or you could alternatively say, we think that retail should stay on Main Street regardless of how high it is, the slopes, and we think this should only, you know, count on Secor Road. So you really have a lot of options here on how you could approach it. And I think what I'm trying to do is give you an idea of how you could approach the response. I don't think that, I'm not advocating to slow this referral down. I do think that the goal would be to get today some sense of what you want to go into that referral letter so that you can take action at the next meeting.
Right.
It's just, these are things to consider.
So question for Amanda. Typically, my experience with these text changes is that the applicant drafts something, submits it to the board. Council's going to review it, and then from there we compose, I guess, our recommendations, and that sort of would accompany this text amendment back to the village board. Is that kind of a fair characterization of what could happen or should happen?
Yeah, I think that your recommendation would be in the form of a memo back to the Board of Trustees. And just to clarify before, my point about the, I didn't mean to suggest that there'd been some bait and switch about the plans. I had not seen this different set of drawings here. So to me, this is new. I understand fully if you guys have already seen these renderings, but I still think that it's relevant for you guys to consider whether you should recommend to the Board of Trustees or not, whether there could be a segmentation issue for them, you know, whether you want to say, should this be something that you consider, should the text change be something you consider hand in hand with the actual project that looks to be considered here? I don't think it matters whether or not like, you know, the plans are new or not, whether they've been around or, you know, maybe this is something that the Board of Trustees did not think about.
I mean, I would just say, since we're writing a like recommendation letter or a comment letter back to the Board of Trustees, if the other board members are okay, why don't we just include a comment that the Board of Trustees should consider whether there's a segmentation, you know,
Sure,
exactly
yeah.
as you just articulated the issue. If the other board
Yeah.
members, I have no problem with that.
Right, because in the end, they're going to be the one determining whether to do this or not or voting on it.
Exactly. Yeah, I just,
And then at some point, it's back to us to do site plan and architectural and all those sorts of things, right?
yeah, yes.
Yeah, and they also need to understand, I think, that if this project is to move forward and it's unsegmented, then they're going to be lead agency as well. So they're going to have to do lead agency on environmental review for not just the zoning text amendment, but for the site plan as well. Or not the site, but the whole project in general, the site specific stuff as well.
There will be lead agency on the project as well? Okay.
No,
Was that, maybe I'm incorrect, maybe,
if this were not segmented, if this were happening at the same time, then they would be lead agency for the whole proposal, you know, including the project. But I don't think that that the Board of Trustees would be lead agency if the project itself were just happening at a separate time.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
So yeah, I think, yeah, we're saying the same thing. So if they treat this as one review process where they're looking at the zoning text amendment and the site plan approval as one process, it's unsegmented, then they will be lead agency because it's
Right.
the zoning text change. So they're going to have to be lead agency for the environmental review.
Right.
You know, so that I'm not sure if that factors in to why they did it this way. I honestly don't know. It precedes me entirely, but generally speaking, it's you know, it's good planning practice to just consider applications as a whole in one shot.
So I also wanted to bring up, I mean, we've talked about this a couple of other times, that the code actually does provide for a few specific things that in the event of a referral, you should be discussing. So if we're going to be talking about those at the next meeting, those specific, you know, enumerated things, then I think it would be a good idea for either us to review what those things are right now, or for you guys to look at them ahead of the next meeting, so we can have like that, you know, a good discussion for then us to put into memo form.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole point tonight is kind of hash out these points. I mean, Jeff certainly, you know, talked about the commercial on the ends, you know, on the westerly, you know, on the bookends of the building. I mean, you know, incorporating some of these suggestions into a recommendation back to the board. I mean, the only thing I threw out was lodging, whether that's, you know, feasible or whatever else at this point in time. It's just, again, I mean, these are sort of like what we feel the best thing is for the sort of the downtown there in that specific zone.
Mm-hmm.
Just real quickly before we continue forward with any other discussion, I'm not sure if Keller Sessions is needed anymore at this point, and so I'm wondering if it's amenable to the board, we can let Brian sign off.
Pretty please. If anything comes up, you know where to reach me, guys.
Good night.
Thanks, Mark.
Have a good night. Okay.
Totally forgot that they were still on.
Can I just ask a general zoning question and a little bit sort of touching on what Jaime was referring to earlier? Upper Croton Avenue, is that a different, what's the zone of, where we've got the ground floor commercial with resident? I know the slope isn't as steep, but there is some.
Give me a second and I'll pull up the zoning map.
You're saying by the library, I think there's a VC.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the library, and then there is that project across the street from the library. I don't know what.
That's, I believe it's multifamily up to the
Right,
library.
right, that changed from NC1, I think, or NC2 to multifamily, right, JB? The Baker property.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't have the same requirement.
No, but, right, it's a different zone.
Right. Okay. Okay. But do some of those sites have some of the same slope and grade issues that this site does, or did they not?
I don't think by the library. I mean, there's a sidewalk there that is, I'm not sure that it's over 10% there. As you get closer to Route 9, towards closer to City Hall, I think probably there is an area that is very steep as well. Yeah, the whole area is.
This area right here.
Yeah, that's the village center. Then you have a multifamily.
Right.
But
Okay.
VC, you have to have ground floor commercial.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right, residential is not permitted on the first floor of VC.
Right.
Again, if, so those conditions are kind of similar, right? Even though they're different zoning districts, they are similar conditions. So again, understand that your referral letter is going to provide guidance on how to look at things. It doesn't mean that the Board of Trustees has to do anything with them. So if you think this is good planning advice that the Board of Trustees needs to hear, and it's a related issue, then that's the place where you look at it. It doesn't mean that anything will actually be able to be born out of this process, but it may lead to discussions down the road as the comp plan gets updated to make considerations for other districts that have this same problem. So I think it might be useful because again, do you want to deal with this every single time somebody comes in and wants to do residential in a place where you can't make it work? Or is it better to adjust the process?
Yeah, this is kind of like raising an issue and I know you're saying that this was the course that was charted, but JB, if you just applied for a variance back last summer, you could have had a determination on that a long time ago instead of writing a memo.
I did ask you that, man. I did ask you about the variance.
Jeff, I will, we did submit, we did went through the process and it was meeting with the staff. It was meeting with,
No, I know. I'm just, I believe you that this was the course that was charted between the village and staff and everyone, but I'm just, it seems like that, basically it's one variance because you're talking about one project. It would just be to allow ground floor residential. If everything else is
right,
as of right.
We actually requesting that in another CBA matter. So it is.
And you're not the only one,
Right.
It's coming up in other cases too.
Right. So the idea was, and even we have done it for other municipalities that, we even suggested that, you go for the change of use change variance, and then even if you don't get it, that will become part of your tool to say this is why we need to do a text amendment. But
yeah, I think that you have something here where you could, even if it's just creating like sort of like a floating zone or something like that as part of this process that can be applied to every single district where there's special conditions that are being met. The planning board could apply this floating zone to drop in and say the height is too high. You're required to do commercial here, but you can't make commercial work because of the steep slopes. Apply this residential, and that way it's something that gets reviewed by the planning board, but doesn't require a variance every single time. If it's something that keeps coming up, and that's, the benefit of going through a zoning text amendment and changing it in one way is great. I wish somebody at the beginning of this process would have maybe been a little more thoughtful about how much this is an issue in Ossining.
I mean, my point of view is, just to go back to something I said before, is I want to see the fewest opportunities to deviate from ground floor commercial where we zoned for that. So,
Right. So to Jeff's point, maybe it's an okay thing that this remains something that is subject to a use variance.
Well, the thinking that we were given, that it was more, they wanted to find something that they didn't want this to happen in all the projects and all the areas. That's why it was that restrictive adjacent to this. They were trying to find a way to describe the zone so only pertain to that project. It was the reverse what we're trying to do, to create a kind of universal conditional use that can be applied throughout the rest of the zone. So
I wanted to, now that you've mentioned that conditional use piece, I think it was Michael who brought up in prior meetings the fact that that the new residential piece that you're creating is also conditional use, which I think in the past we've all taken for granted. Yes, it will be conditional use because you're actually changing the conditional use section. But maybe another thing that the board wants to discuss is the language as proposed sufficiently clear to get the point across that the ground floor residential will also be subject to a conditional use permit? Because I think that nobody wants it to just be automatically, permitted without any conditions.
I think the text amendment says that. I mean, I think that the section that we're changing actually says, oh no, it does. I thought it did say the conditional.
I think that maybe that's something to be considered, is making it a little bit clearer that ground floor residential will also be subject to a conditional use permit.
And going back to what you guys were saying before, I mean, if yes, we were willing to go for the use variance, but now we have gone this way, I don't know that I can go back to my client and say, let's start now for a use variance. So.
Yeah, I think
we should just I think we should just, as these ideas come up, just sort of, I don't know, if people want to do it differently, but almost just sort of take a consensus of the board. Do we want to add this point to our memo? Do we want to add this so that we build the list? Because I think these are a lot of everything that's being raised, or what Amanda just said is another good point. So
Right, these are all going to wind up in a recommendation letter.
Yeah,
we have Jamie here. Maybe we can get Jamie to start the work on writing this memo while we're sitting here. So if you have a piece of language that you want to throw in there, a sentence that you want to throw in there, take the consensus right now. Maybe Jamie can write it down, and if everyone has the consensus around that, she can put that in the memo as we're sitting here. Is that okay, Jamie?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. So do you want to pitch a sentence, Jeff?
So the one thing I would include is, if the Board of Trustees is inclined to pass a text amendment, that the proposed language is overly broad and it should not include, it should not extend to Barlow Lane, and that it should ideally apply to the parcels in the middle of that block on Secor, but not the end parcels. Maybe you could find a neater way of writing that, but. So if they're inclined to go along with this, I would just say that it needs to, whatever they pass, I would recommend it be much more narrow in applicability to the center of the block, but not, the parcels throughout the block, but not inclusive of the end parcels. The idea being that there's an opportunity for ground floor commercial on the end parcels.
I would agree with that.
fine with that.
Can we get a read back, Jamie, of what that sentence sounds like so that everybody knows what's been written there? That was a little well thought out, but maybe not.
Okay, what I got was if the Board of Trustees is inclined to pass the text amendment, that the language is overly broad and should not extend to Barlow Lane, that it should apply to the parcels in the middle of the block and not be applicable to the end parcels.
Could you maybe amend that to say that the language as presented, just add the words as presented to clarify what that means? Is everybody okay with that?
Fine.
Jamie, somehow you took that down extremely well. That's what I intended to say.
Thanks.
All right. Is there more?
Yeah, could somebody just, for my edification, review the concept of the conditional use permit again?
Just in general?
Well, no, as if it would apply to this language or not? We're talking about that being sort of a separate action.
Okay, so maybe you and I are kind of talking about the same concern that we have here, because so what he's amending here is actually in the Station Plaza North District section under conditional uses that are allowed in that district. And it's saying that residential will be permitted on the first floor, but I think it's not sufficiently clear as to whether residential on the first floor will also be subject to a conditional use permit, because it just is kind of written as if it's like an as of right on the first floor.
So then that'll be a second condition. You know, they got to come back to whoever the lead agency is to get that okay.
Yeah, so I mean, right now residential is only permitted above non-residential uses as a conditional use. That's how the status of things are right now. And this would permit residential on the first floor. And I just want to make sure that the text change, if the Board of Trustees were inclined to adopt it, would be sufficiently drafted to make it clear that residential on the first floor would also be subject to a conditional use permit.
But would this address it, the word allowed in the proposed text amendment, that word be changed to shall be a conditional use on the ground floor?
I think that would be much better.
Because allowed sounds as of right.
Yes, that was how I was reading it.
So I'd put that out to the board. I think that we should make that recommendation as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, can we get a proposed sentence to add to the that Jamie can scribe for us?
Do you want me to take a hack at it?
Do we really need to do that like right this second?
Well, I would.
No, I guess not. Would you like us to workshop that and submit it to the board at the meeting?
I think that's the preferred way. I think, look, let's hash out some thoughts here and ideas, and you guys can, paper it the right way and word it the right way. I mean, that can happen afterward.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea, Mike.
I think let's just flush out some concepts here, because this isn't going to be, happening or get voted on next week. It'll, we need to refine this some more, but flush out some ideas and you guys can paper it and get it the right way.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we have to, I just want to make sure, because I know that they gave us an extension, but aren't we supposed to act?
You're well past the deadline for acting in accordance with the code. They gave you they extended the time for you guys to act. Trying to remember if I put it in my notes. Yeah. They waived the time frame last meeting, but if you come to a decision if you guys are ready next meeting, or I'm sorry, on the 26th to direct staff to, draft some sort of a referral, I would hope that the applicant, gives us sufficient time to draft that and get it to the Board of Trustees. Because then there's like an end to this planning board process,
JB?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, I can ask the the applicant, but I don't see a reason. I mean, it will be, I guess, another 30 days to add to the, I will confirm that, but I don't see that being an issue.
Okay, thank you. Let us know if you hear anything differently.
Yeah.
I know it's been a long process, but partly because of,
More, I don't know, I know we're talking about, this is we're proposing a text amendment, but I just wanted to understand. So it seems like we have two ways to look at this. One is like specifically for this project, and another one that's a more broad idea that this will apply to any place in the village that where the slope will prohibit commercial use on the first floor. Is that?
I think it's fine to just put a recommendation to the Board of Trustees that they should determine whether there's other steep I mean, because we're just kind of kicking it back to them, determine if it's appropriate to amend the zoning in other places as well, if there's similar steep slopes. But I think that going back to the point I've been just repeating is that we want to encourage ground floor commercial as much as we can.
Right.
I actually think that point might as well be in the memo as well at the top of it. Like, we should be encouraging ground floor residential, ground floor commercial, and then all of the reasons, all these other conditions. That should be at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that goes directly to a point that, for your referral, you should be considering, which is whether this amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which the comprehensive plan that's in place is the 2009 plan. And it's probably something that if you haven't already looked at, all of the board members, you should look at with respect to this, and see if this proposal is compliant with that, because it's a big piece of how you should be, referring this back to the board.
Jeff, I mean, is the assumption that the comp plan is going to continue to desire commercial on these first floors? I mean, is that?
I mean, basically, we're at a point in the process where we're like just trying to get as much public participation as possible. So I don't think any real views have been refined. I can just tell you, I just think there's a general sentiment throughout the community.
Yeah, I think that I can't speak on the sentiment of the community, and Jeff, as a committee member on the comp plan, I think is probably best set to answer this question. But planning practice says that you want ground floor retail around walkable communities, around train stations. So there's a lot of support that says you want to keep ground floor retail here as much as possible. I think the conditions of the site are challenging, but in general, you always want to have as much ground floor retail as possible. On a professional level, the challenge with ground floor retail is that you need, especially in places where you don't have huge parking lots and the ability for people to drive up, you need foot traffic. And in order to have foot traffic, you need people. So, one of the challenges with that's not being discussed as a part of this, but is important, I think, to every shop owner, is that if you don't have enough people who live nearby that are going to walk past your store and they can't drive there, it's very hard to succeed as a storefront. And I can tell you that just from my personal experience running a bid for the last 3.5 years. You live and die off of that foot traffic. And even in downtown Yonkers, where you have some, what would be considered gigantic buildings in Ossining, you still have trouble with foot traffic to support regular mom and pop restaurants and stores. So that's, that is a piece of it that contributes to the challenge. And I think that, hopefully that comes up as part of the discussion in the comp plan. I imagine it will. I don't actually have any idea where the community stands on that. I have an idea, but but I don't know where the community is going to end up on that.
Well, there are definitely a few discrete places in the existing comp plan where this area of the village is discussed. So I think that if you guys have time before the next meeting, it'd be, you know, a good idea to just take a look so that you can have a sense of, you know, how this text change will impact the comp plan.
You can just highlight those places on the comp plan so we can zero right in on them.
Sure. Do you want me to?
Now, just maybe an email.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyone else, thoughts, comments, suggestions?
I think Jamie should just add to the list the question about whether the text amendment and the project itself be combined for one environmental review.
One other quick thing that came up last week or last time we talked about this was just making sure that the conditional use was only for frontage on Secor, if the lots were consolidated to go through the block at some point in the future. So it couldn't be more widely interpreted if there was a consolidation or something like that.
Do you think that we had a language in our end that says fronting on Secor Road?
To me,
It's
that
not
language
just-
seems pretty vague, you know?
It's not just the lot front. Right now, it looks like it's the lots that are fronting on Secor Road, but if the lot in the future fronts on both sides, we'd want the portion of the structure.
Right. That's what I'm. Right. That's what I'm saying. If we end up joining a lot that has a front and becomes one lot and it has a front on Main Street, you're saying that this should only apply to the part on Secor Road. The Main Street still needs to have the commercial at the first floor.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the text needs to be pretty tight on that because, again, you know, what this developer is proposing is nice, but what if they merge the lots, sell the lots, the next person comes in and says, look, says I can do it. And then you have no recourse because you didn't tighten the language up at that time.
So have it apply to only the lots with frontage on Secor Road. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, you're on mute.
I think what we're saying is if the lot goes through, we want commercial use on main or water or whatever's on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So that, you know, you'd have, I know they're actually like two different levels. So they'd be like two different stories if you actually had a building that went through. But it would only be for the level or the part of the building that's fronting Secor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another point would be just as you rise in elevation on the coming up Secor, you don't want to affect view shed. So make a note in there somewhere about, you know, that view shed issue with the elevation.
When I send the board those places in the comp plan to look at, I'll also send you the section of the code that lists, you know, what specific items to consider for a referral so that you can have those in mind for the next meeting.
Okay. We're approaching 9 o'clock, so let's try to wrap this up, I guess.
I think you made a lot of good progress.
Yeah, I really do want to say that I appreciate the decision to hold this work session because it saves the board from having to go through this whole discussion during a regular meeting on top of all of the other procedural stuff. So it appears that the next planning board meeting should be pretty quick, relatively speaking, and that's a big plus, I think, to everybody.
Yes. There's a few things off the agenda, so that should speed things along. All right. That said, anything else on this one, or?
Just, if you want to make the next meeting even quicker, one of the things that you might want to think about that you have to consider for this referral is whether the change is consistent with the aims and principles embodied in the law as to the particular districts concerned. And the purposes in the Station Plaza North District are to encourage mixed-use development near the train station and protect and promote the adaptive reuse of architecturally noteworthy buildings, increase business near the train station, and provide opportunities for residential uses. So that's something to also maybe, consider.
Okay.
Can we just cite those aims? Yeah, can we just cite them for the board of trustees, just so we put that in our memo, what you just read?
Yeah, but I think you should also make a statement as to whether this proposal actually conforms with those or not.
Because the last piece you read there was to encourage residential uses. So
yes, so that the language is actually to provide opportunities for residential uses downtown to encourage street life during the day and evening.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note a couple of things about encouraging street life. That, one way of encouraging street life is having commercial use on the bottom floor. Another way of encouraging street life is by bringing people to the neighborhood so that they can enjoy what's going on in the property right next door. So, it's not a binary sort of decision.
Mm-hmm.
Getting rid of retail means that you're not bringing people to the district. We have to consider both of those aspects.
In other words, the adjoining areas which will require ground floor commercial, this may be providing the street traffic for those businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So look at the synergies.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially with the residential being mid-block here and the commercial on the ends, which is which is also a known configuration and consistent.
Okay.
Good.
So then at this point, I guess we can adjourn if there's any, JB, any other comments on this one, or?
No, I think this is, in this case, that's just if you have any more questions, otherwise.
Okay, to be continued. Okay. All right, I guess that said, we'll adjourn unless there's any other, new business we have to discuss. We can probably do that.
I do just want to point out that in addition to the items we discussed tonight, there are 3 new items on the agenda for the 26th. 2 BARs and 1 planning board. So I'm not sure if I've sent out those items yet, but if I haven't, I will send them out tomorrow.
Could you mention what those items are just really fast?
Sure. 119 Main Street is a BAR. 71 Pecanico is a BAR, and 145 North Highland, which is McCloskey Community Services, and they're a planning board site plan.
Okay, and the site plan application is for what kind of a building again?
It's an educational building, a school of some sort.
Right, there's a bit of history over there. There was an approval several years back. There was an attorney involved. So you might want to just pull that file and see what the thought process is there, I guess, with the applicant.
Yeah,
All right.
Okay. All right, guys.
this is really, really helpful.
All right.
All right, so that said, we'll adjourn and we'll be talking to everybody in another few weeks, I guess.
Yes.
Great.
Buddy.
Good night,
everybody.
good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.